Shi Feng's recovery fascinated even Bibi Dong. She hovered at his side, watching his eyes anxiously. Until now, her greatest worry had been that Shi Feng might emerge from this ordeal blind, his vision gone forever. But as she peered closer, she saw that the same restorative energy knitting together his limbs was pouring into his eyes too. If every other part of him could grow back, why not his sight? Sure enough, the storm of energy around Shi Feng's face began to subside. Layers of shimmering light peeled away, revealing a pair of clear, bright eyes where nothing had been but darkness moments before. Above them, thunder rumbled, and forked bolts of lightning danced in the misty air. "Shi Feng, how do you feel?" Bibi Dong asked, concern softening her voice. She alighted lightly atop his head, her gaze fixed on his newly restored eyes. He winced, discomfort still lacing his features, and summoned enough strength to move his eyeballs, first to the right, then to the left, until his eyes settled on Bibi Dong's face. Then suddenly, his pupils widened in shock. With a harsh exhalation, a jet of blood spurted from his nostrils, hurtling through the air like a crimson arrow and thudding 2 meters away. "Shi Feng!" Bibi Dong cried, dropping from his head and kneeling beside him in alarm. "What's wrong?" She reached out, her eyes wide with fright, as Shi Feng struggled to answer amidst the pain. Shi Feng's chest heaved as his heart thundered against his ribs. When he dared to open his eyes, he saw his teacher, Bibi Dong, in a shockingly clear vision, her heart beating as if she'd been split open for all to see. He blinked, and she vanished, replaced only by the deep blue of the sky. One more blink, and the vivid image returned, more unnerving than before. He snapped his eyes shut, heat creeping into his cheeks. This was his teacher. What was he doing? Gulping, he forced himself to speak. "Teacher, I'm all right. It's just that the thunder and lightning yang energy was so intense. I got a nosebleed." Bibi Dong let out a relieved laugh, folding her arms. "You reckless child," she teased. "You were on the brink just now, and now you're worried about a little nosebleed? Stand up. Let me see if you've got any injuries left." "I've fully recovered," Shi Feng said, scrambling to his feet, though his face was still warm with embarrassment. The teacher gave him a quick once-over, her gaze lingering for a moment where his robe concealed him. Finally satisfied, she turned away. "Good. Now put your robes back on properly. Let's head home." Shi Feng smoothed the fabric over his shoulders, straightened his collar, and hurried to catch up, his pulse slowly returning to normal. "Teacher, shall we go?" Shi Feng fell into step beside Bibi Dong. At that moment, another surge of thunder tribulation washed over him, lifting him several inches off the ground. An almost palpable confidence flickered in his eyes, and Bibi Dong nodded in approval. She unfurled her wings and darted ahead, and Shi Feng followed without hesitation. As they flew, a new insight blossomed within him. He finally understood the true nature of the Eye of Punishment. He had always known it as a devastating offensive power, but now he realized it could also see through any illusion, piercing to the very heart of things. This must be one of its many hidden abilities. Shi Feng couldn't help the wry smile that crossed his face. When he first absorbed the Wangchuan Chu Shui Lu, he'd longed for such clairvoyance, only to be disappointed. He never imagined he would gain it, only after surviving the catastrophe, with the autumn dew playing its part in the awakening. He glanced at Bibi Dong as she soared ahead and resisted the urge to test his new sight. If she discovered he'd mastered this ability, she'd certainly give him a good thrashing. By the time they returned to the Pope's palace, the sun was high in the sky. Bibi Dong folded her wings neatly and turned to him. "Shi Feng, take a rest. We'll have lunch together shortly." Shi Feng shook his head, still breathing hard. "No, just now I absorbed something from the tribulation. I need to go back and study it." Without another word, he turned and hurried off, his heart still racing. He wasn't ready to face his master yet, not before he'd calmed his thoughts and banished every lingering doubt. Back in the dormitory, he found Lena sprawled on her bed, utterly spent. He dropped to one knee beside her. "Lena, are you all right?" She lifted her head on a wave of exhaustion and managed a tired smile. "I'll live, thanks to you. Honestly, only a monster like you could get through that training." Shi Feng returned her grin, though he still felt the tremors of his recent ordeal. "Take it easy. I'll train with you this afternoon." Just then, a server pushed a cart into the room, laden with steaming bowls and plates. Shi Feng helped Lena to her feet. Come on, eat up. We've got less than a month left. We can't afford to run on empty. Chapter 139, Bloody Mary. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Under Hu Lena's relentless daily drills, her body finally absorbed the last vestiges of medicinal energy, propelling her forward 2 cultivation tiers. After all, she had ingested the power of 2 celestial grasses. Though part of that energy went into strengthening her physique, the surplus still far exceeded what a single celestial grass could deliver, hence her dramatic leap. With this breakthrough, the fairy grass's energy at her core was at last fully spent. Shi Feng, get ready, Hu Lena instructed, her tone calm but commanding. Tomorrow I'll take your senior sister to hunt a soul beast so she can ascend to the Soul King realm. Once that's done, we'll set out for the killing capital. Yes, teacher, Shi Feng replied, bowing in respect. He couldn't hide his excitement at her success. In the original timeline, Hu Lena wouldn't have reached the killing capital until she was a 50th level Soul King, and only afterward would she break into the final tier of the Hell stage. Now, having already achieved the Soul King realm so early, there was nothing to prevent them from heading straight to the heart of the Empire's martial world. What's more, after a month of grueling combat training, absolutely no soul techniques allowed, Hu Lena's martial prowess had soared to unprecedented heights. The killing capital would be within their grasp. This month, Hu Lena hadn't once come by to tease Shi Feng. Her training had been so grueling that she simply didn't have the energy. When she finally returned to the dormitory, she stumbled straight into the shower and then collapsed into a deep sleep. On the roof above, Shi Feng knelt in meditation under the moonlight. The regimen that had nearly broken Hu Lena was only moderate for his unusually hardy physique. After 4 days in the trial realm alongside their teacher, Bibi Dong, both Hu Lena and Bibi Dong had broken through into the Soul King realm. Hu Lena's 5th soul ring now gleamed black, a 10,000-year soul ring earned through sheer perseverance. Go back and make your preparations, Bibi Dong instructed. You and Shi Feng will need to spend several years inside the Inner Temple's trial. Hu Lena's eyes flew open in surprise. Several years? Is the trial really that difficult? It's nothing to underestimate, Bibi Dong replied coolly. You already know its reputation. Understood, teacher, Hu Lena said, her voice steady with resolve. Back in the dormitory's main chamber, Hu Lena shook the bed where Shi Feng lay napping. He blinked awake, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Senior sister, you're back, he asked, sitting up and stretching. Hu Lena smiled warily but brightly. Yes, and we have a lot to prepare. She glanced at Shi Feng's composed face and felt a surge of confidence. If he found the training moderate, then together they would conquer whatever challenges lay ahead. Hey, slow down. Where are you taking me? Shi Feng called out, hustling to keep pace with Hu Lena. Without turning around, she replied, Master said we might be spending years in the killing capital. We'd better stock up on everything we'll need. Fair enough, Shi Feng agreed, falling in beside her as they stepped onto the crowded street. He frowned when Hu Lena navigated straight to a row of cosmetics stalls and began filling her basket with bottles of rouge and gouache. Cosmetics? Who are you planning to impress in Wuhan City? Hu Lena didn't even glance at him. She simply added more of each item, dozens of every shade, and then held up a small tin of face powder that reminded Shi Feng of one his Aunt Jin used in his previous life. And while we're at it, she said, let's grab a few hundred sets of spare clothing. Shi Feng couldn't help but smile. She was right. When you're a soul master on dangerous missions, a torn robe could leave you vulnerable, and he didn't want to rely on luck for fresh clothes. Besides, Bibi Dong had given them more than enough pocket money. They had no reason to hold back. By nightfall, the two had scoured half of Wuhan City's markets, provisions, attire, tools, personal items, and packed every necessity into their bags. At dawn the next day, Bibi Dong led her 2 apprentices down a hidden lane beyond the city walls. Their footsteps were light, their supplies secure, and ahead of them lay the long road to the killing capital, and whatever fate awaited there. Shi Feng, Bibi Dong, and Hu Lena pressed on northward by foot, unwilling to waste time on a carriage. On the 5th night, they stumbled into a curious little town. At first glance, it was no larger than a typical crossroads village, but something about it set Shi Feng's nerves on edge. They threaded their way down a deserted main street. Though few people strolled about, each face they passed bristled with a barely concealed hostility. Some glared openly, others watched from shadowed doorways, their murderous intent simmering just below the surface. Bibi Dong strode at the front, her tall frame draped in a flowing black cloak, a dark veil hiding every feature of her face. Juliana followed close behind, cheeks paling beneath her own mask. Without these disguises, their striking appearances would have drawn a swarm of trouble in this already unnerving place. Juliana's heart pounded as she caught the wolfish stares of burly townsmen sizing her up. Only Bibi Dong's frigid, intimidating aura kept those men at bay. Otherwise, they surely would have lunged forward. Shi Feng inhaled slowly, tasting the same cruel undercurrent that marked settlements on the edge of the so-called killing capital. Still, they pressed on. Bibi Dong led them down a narrow side street to the largest inn in town, a squat, stone building whose weathered sign creaked above the door. Here at last they might find rest and answers to the dark mysteries that shrouded this strange place. "Give me a room and 3 Bloody Marys," Bibi Dong said, her voice so cold it sent a shiver through the front desk clerk. He trembled as he fumbled for the key rack. "Yes, of course. Room 303. That'll be 3 silver soul coins. Would you like your drinks here at the bar or sent up to the room?" Bibi Dong produced 3 gleaming coins and tossed them onto the counter. "Send them up." Without another word, she swept past him and climbed the grand staircase. Shi Feng and Juliana exchanged a nod before hurrying after her. Only when they'd reached the top did the clerk dare to wipe the sweat from his brow and let out a long, relieved breath. He'd never felt such icy authority from a single glance. Juliana peered at the bartender's tray with wide eyes. "Teacher, what exactly is a Bloody Mary?" she asked. Bibi Dong smiled mysteriously. "You'll find out soon enough." Shi Feng leaned in and whispered, "Senior sister, I promise, you're not going to like this." Those words only deepened Juliana's curiosity. Earlier in the main hall, Shi Feng had noticed several patrons cradling glasses of deep crimson liquid. A quick sniff had told him it was real blood, its spiritual energy long since drained, leaving little more than wasted fluid. They stepped into the suite. It was spacious. 2 large beds flanked the room, a low table sat at its center, and a plush sofa hugged the wall behind it. In the far right corner, a door led to a small private bath. No sooner had they crossed the threshold than a server glided forward and placed 3 goblets of scarlet liquid on the table, then quietly withdrew. Juliana leaned over the goblets and sniffed. The iron tang of blood hit her nostrils, and she recoiled, her brow furrowing in distaste. "Teacher," she said hesitantly, "what kind of blood is this? And why have we ordered it?" Bibi Dong lowered her hood, peeled off her scarf, lifted the cup of crimson liquid, and drank it in one smooth motion. After a moment, she set the cup on the table and fixed her gaze on Shi Feng and Juliana. "Your turn," she said. "Drink up, then I'll explain everything." Juliana's wide eyes went round with shock. Their teacher had just downed a cup of blood, and now she expected them to follow suit? Shi Feng picked up his own cup and offered her an encouraging smile. "Senior sister Lena, don't worry. I'll drink it with you." Lena hesitated, fingers trembling around the cup's rim. She'd slain countless foes, and even mighty soul beasts, without batting an eye, yet the idea of drinking blood still made her stomach churn. Still, trusting Shi Feng's calm confidence, she lifted the cup to her lips. Shi Feng tipped his head back and swallowed the dark liquid in one gulp. Despite its stale edge, he detected an undercurrent of sweetness, far more pleasant than he'd expected. At the same moment, Lena closed her eyes and drank. The thick, metallic taste hit her tongue first, a blend of salt and iron so vivid it seemed to burn her senses. She clenched her jaw, forced down the urge to retch, and drained every drop. Across the table, Bibi Dong watched them with a faint, approving nod. "Good," she said softly. "Now that you've both tasted it, I'll tell you why we had to." "Teacher, why did you make us drink this?" Juliana's brow furrowed as she struggled to wash the bitter aftertaste from her mouth. Bibi Dong regarded her calmly. "That was a cup of human blood." Juliana's face went pale. "What?" She barely had time to protest before her stomach convulsed, and she dashed to the bathroom, where she threw up violently. When she returned, Bibi Dong was already watching Shi Feng with an unreadable expression. "Shi Feng, you're not reacting. Are you all right?" Shi Feng met her gaze evenly. "Instructor, you know my martial soul allows me to absorb blood. Drinking human blood isn't new to me." Bibi Dong nodded, recalling the dark nature of Shi Feng's spirit. She let the matter drop. "Good. Your current true strength matches that of your senior sister. Once we enter the killing capital, I want you to protect her at all costs." "I understand, teacher," Shi Feng replied firmly. "Anyone who threatens senior sister will have to go through me first." At that moment, Hu Liena, pale but composed, stepped back into the room. Her eyes met Shi Feng's vow, and a soft warmth spread through her chest. Chapter 140. The King of Slaughter. Bibi Dong's crimson gaze swept over them. "Remember, inside Slaughter City, no one can use soul skills. You'll have to rely on your physical strength alone." She paused, as if weighing her next words. "Shi Feng, you'll be escorting me. Though my soul power exceeds yours, my close-quarters combat skills aren't nearly as refined." Shi Feng nodded, suppressing the flicker of pride at being entrusted with her safety. At that moment, Hu Liena returned, her face twisted in distaste as she carried 2 goblets filled with dark, viscous liquid. "Teacher," she demanded, lifting a hand to ward off the stench, "why are you making us drink this? Abomination!" Bibi Dong's lips curved into a faint smile. "It's human blood, a Bloody Mary, as it's called here. I could have simply transported you straight into Slaughter City, but that would defeat the purpose. To gain entry, you must prove yourselves under your own power. Drinking this is the most basic trial." Hu Liena's stomach churned at the thought. "You want us to get used to blood before we even arrive?" "Precisely." Bibi Dong inclined her head. "It's a small taste of what awaits. I won't spoil all the horrors of Slaughter City for you, but know this. Once you've claimed 10 victories in the Hell Slaughter Field, you'll earn the right to step onto the Hell Road. That's where you will face your true test, and your fates will be decided." Shi Feng glanced at his companion, then locked eyes with Bibi Dong. The room's silence pressed in on them. With a steadying breath, he raised his goblet and met her challenge. "The Hell Road is your only way out of Slaughter City. Once you pass it, you'll reach the Killing God realm." Shi Feng and Hu Liena nodded, committing Bibi Dong's warning to memory. Bibi Dong then produced several bottles and jars overflowing with pills. "Take these," she instructed. "They'll ease the side effects of the passage." Shi Feng and Hu Liena accepted the pills gratefully. Bibi Dong smiled with confidence. "When I entered Slaughter City alone, my gear wasn't nearly as good as yours, yet I still made it out. I know you two can do the same." She glanced at the setting sun. "It's grown late. Let's bathe and rest. Then we'll be in better shape for tomorrow." After 5 arduous days on the road, eating, sleeping, and fighting beneath open skies, the 3 were caked in dust and grime. For Shi Feng and Hu Liena, both used to everyday comforts, the filth had become unbearable. Bibi Dong led them toward the camp's makeshift bathing area, her expression calm as ever. Steam rose from the wooden tubs. Huddled together, they washed away the stench of their journey. As warm water sluiced over them, Shi Feng could almost forget the dangers that lay ahead. But he knew that at dawn, they would have to brave the Hell Road, and beyond it, whatever trials awaited in the Killing God realm. With their packs restocked, bodies cleansed, and spirits renewed, they settled in for the night, readying themselves for the road that no one ever truly forgets. Shi Feng stepped out of the bathing house just as Lena finished washing. Only she remained inside, and Bibi Dong was nowhere to be seen. "Senior sister," he asked, concern in his voice. "Where's the teacher?" Lena emerged from the steam, her brow furrowed. "She's gone," she said, "and she told us we'll have to manage on our own from here." Shi Feng ran a hand through his damp hair. "But she never explained how to enter the killing capital. Bibi Dong just said we'd have to find our own way in, but this town is enormous. Where do we even begin?" Lena gave him a reassuring smile. "She said we'd find it," she repeated. "Trust her." Shi Feng nodded. If Bibi Dong believed it was straightforward, then it probably was, once they'd found the right lead. He glanced skyward. "We've been traveling for 5 days straight. You should get some rest tonight. I'll keep watch." Lena shook her head. "No, We'll split the night in two. I'll rest in the first half. You take the second. Shi Feng grinned. I appreciate the sentiment, but I've never grown tired practicing at night, and the extra training actually helps me recover my energy. Lena laughed softly. All right then. You take the first watch. I'll wake you when my turn comes. As darkness settled over the town, they made ready for their night shifts, both confident that, come morning, they'd have the clue they needed to breach the killing capital. Don't worry, I won't push myself too hard, and I'll stay aware of my surroundings. Lena inclined her head, no longer arguing, and settled onto one side of the narrow bed. Opposite her, Shi Feng sat cross-legged, quietly running through his breathing exercises, every sense on alert. In the heart of the killing capital, a vast chamber lay bathed in darkness. At its center, a towering figure perched on an enormous throne-like chair. The walls, the floor, even the air, seemed tinged with a deep crimson hue. Directly before him spread a vast pool of blood, thick rivulets swirling on its surface. A sudden creak announced the opening of heavy doors, and a sliver of outside light cut through the gloom. For the first time, the stranger's face emerged from shadow, pallid as moonlight, eyes gleaming an unearthly red, every inch of him wrapped in a flowing scarlet cloak. You've returned, he drawled, his voice a blade of ice. Instantly, a murderous aura surged from him, crashing through the room like a torrent. A dark-robed figure stood at the edge of the courtyard, her face hidden in shadow. Yet the graceful sweep of her cloak and the curve of her silhouette left no doubt. She was a woman. A frigid, murderous aura radiated from her, repelling even the King of Slaughter's most insidious temptations. She had no wish to indulge his nostalgia. In a voice as cold as steel, she announced, I haven't come for pleasantries. I'm here only to escort 2 disciples for their training. The King of Slaughter laughed, crimson eyes glittering with malice. Training, you say? You expect me to let your protégés roam freely in my domain? Unless you want them to swallow the death god domain whole, along with their lives, I suggest you think again. Unfazed, Bibi Dong met his gaze. The city of Slaughter has its own laws you'd be a fool to break. Touch my disciples, and with a single command, I'll unleash 100,000 soldiers to crush this city. Don't forget, within my death god domain, a soul master's powers are unchecked. Enraged, the King of Slaughter rose to his full height. His massive frame trembled with fury, and twin fangs glinted behind his snarling lips. You dare threaten me? Are you not afraid I'll obliterate you on the spot? Shi Feng took a step forward, his aura dark and oppressive as he charged straight at Bibi Dong. In response, she unleashed the same terrifying power, a sinister black energy crackling around her like living shadows. You can't kill me yet, she spat, her eyes cold as ice. Then, without another word, she turned and strode away. The Slaughter King watched her departure but made no move to bow. Instead, he sank to one knee, his voice barely audible as he murmured, The power of God, truly, the power of God. Outside the small town, Bibi Dong paused beneath a lone lantern. She pushed back her hood, revealing a face of fragile beauty, paler than usual, with a thin line of blood at the corner of her mouth. King of Slaughter, she whispered to the empty street, I misjudged him before. Today he proved himself, a true level 99 titled Douluo. Were it not for the Rakshasa aura I bear, he would have struck me down already. A tremor of fear ran through her. Despite all her strength, she was nowhere near level 99. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself, then spoke softly to the 2 young disciples waiting in the shadows. Xiaoxue, Nana, I've done all I can to protect you. From here on, you must fend for yourselves. A sudden chill filled the air as she directed her next words toward the silent town. If you don't come out now, I'll bury this entire city beneath the earth. With that final threat echoing in the night, Bibi Dong glanced once more at the cluster of rooftops behind her, and then, determination in her stride, she vanished into the darkness. At first light, as the moon's glow faded from the sky, Shi Feng awoke. Across the room, Liena lay curled on her enormous tail, still deep in slumber. He watched her quietly, struck by the gentle rise and fall of her breath, and the soft radiance that clung to her like a halo. It was the first time he'd been so close to her in sleep, and his heart began to race. Compelled by a mixture of awe and affection, he leaned forward to inhale the delicate scent of her cheek. She probably won't even notice, he told himself, wearing a bashful smile as he prepared to slip back into his bed. But before he could move, he saw her lashes flutter. Her cheeks flushed a brilliant rose, and when her eyes opened, they shone with a fierce, almost predatory hunger. Panic seized Shi Feng. "Ah, right, I should go wash up," he blurted, scrambling toward the door. Behind him, Hulina's lips curved into a soft, anticipatory smile, her eyes still glittering with that hungry light. "I'd be happy to help, but I need the full text of chapter 141 to do the rewriting. Could you please paste the entire chapter here? Once I have the complete content, I'll transform it into a smooth, idiomatic English version with your requested character name change." Shi Feng stepped out and immediately noticed the look of simmering resentment on Hu Liana's face. Her silent glare made it hard for him to stay calm. "Hurry up and wash," he urged, gently but firmly nudging her toward the basin. "We'll figure out how to get into the killing capital afterward." They quickly washed up and munched on the dry rations they'd packed. Then they headed down to the hotel lobby. "Xiaochen," Liana asked as they descended the stairs, "how do we get into the killing capital?" Shi Feng drew in a quick breath. According to the novel's storyline, the hotel staff should know the way in. "Let's ask at the front desk," he said. At the reception counter, they found a different attendant from the one they'd seen the previous night. This time it was a young man with a neutral expression, as if nothing could ruffle him. Shi Feng approached, tapped on the countertop, and spoke up. "Excuse me, could you tell me how to enter the killing capital?" The clerk's eyes flicked over Shi Feng, then slid over Lina, as though taking in her elegant form. His tone remained cool. "Are you sure that's where you want to go?" "We are," Shi Feng replied without hesitation. The waiter's face soured, his tone icy. "Buy 2 Bloody Marys," he ordered, "then wait quietly in the lobby." Shi Feng paid without hesitation, handed 1 glass to Hulina, and slid into a corner table. As the waiter glanced at Hulina's graceful silhouette, he swallowed hard. "Such a waste. She's so beautiful," he whispered under his breath. "Shi Feng, do we really have to drink this?" Hulina whispered, her nose wrinkling at the memory of last night's foul smell. He met her gaze steadily. "We have no choice. If we refuse, they won't let us into the killing capital." Setting his glass down, he lifted it in one motion and emptied it in a single gulp. Juliana hesitated, lifted the edge of her veil, and pressed her palm against her mouth to stifle a retch. Mustering her courage, she swallowed the bitter liquid, her cheeks hollowing with the effort. Shi Feng reached into his pocket and produced a hard candy. "Here, this should help." She gratefully popped it into her mouth. As the sweet flavor spread, the harsh aftertaste finally began to fade, and a wave of relief washed over her. At the next table, a middle-aged man threw back his head and laughed, his greedy gaze lingering on Hulina. "Ha-ha, this beauty can't handle a Bloody Mary," he jeered. "Hey there, sister, how about something a little more exciting? Want a taste?" Another wolfish voice chimed in. Shi Feng glanced over and saw a man in his 30s leering at Hulina with shameless intent. By now, every rogue in the hall was fixed on her. Though Juliana's face was hidden behind a veil and her aura deliberately restrained, an undeniable allure still radiated from her. Her graceful curves and poised bearing outshone anything these men had ever laid eyes on. Their eyes flickered with lust and cruelty, typical of the scoundrels who'd flocked to the fringes of the killing capital, where imperial law held no sway and vice ran free. Shi Feng's expression went ice-cold. Lethal intent pulsed through him like a coiled spring. Rising to his feet, he let his voice drop to a menacing rumble. "Hey, buddy, she your girlfriend?" Shi Feng's pulse hammered in his ears as the trio of burly men encircled him and Juliana. One of them stepped forward, voice low and oily. "Give her to me, and I'll guarantee your safety in the killing capital. What do you say?" Shi Feng's cheeks flamed with suppressed rage, but the men barely noticed. Their greedy eyes were fixed on Juliana. "Come on, brother," another sneered. "We all know you two lovebirds came here together. You really want to separate? I'm not trying to steal your girl, just borrow her when the time's right. In exchange, you'll have my protection. Sounds like a sweet deal, doesn't it?" "Count me in," the third man added with a grin. "I'll make sure you're safe too." They laughed, leering at Juliana, whose delicate frame quivered in anger. Shi Feng's Peisha Nence snapped. He whirled toward a nearby waiter, voice thunderous. "Is murder allowed in this establishment?" The waiter glanced up from the stage, surprised by the outburst. "We don't tolerate fighting inside the hotel," he said evenly. "But out on the street, knock yourselves out. Just don't dirty our lobby." Shi Feng gave the waiter a curt nod of thanks, then took Juliana's hand and strode through the glass doors onto the moonlit street. The waiter shook his head, muttering with a rueful smile, "Such confidence. Shame she's off limits. Though I like your style, kid." No sooner had Shi Feng and Juliana stepped into the cool night air than a massive, bearded man burst from the lobby behind them, impatience written in every thunderous footstep. The fight they'd just been denied inside was about to spill out into the alley, and Shi Feng was more than ready. "Better not be late, or you'll miss something fresh, heh." A surge of eager cultivators burst forth, their intentions plain to see. Shi Feng and Juliana waited calmly just outside the clearing. Even at their peak, these intruders hadn't advanced beyond Soul King level. No real challenge for two cultivators backed by a soul sect and their own Soul King guardian. A burly, bearded Soul King charged forward first, not bothering to summon his martial spirit. He lunged straight at Juliana. In response, she unleashed her martial spirit, and 5 glowing spirit rings shimmered around her. A soft pink radiance flared in her eyes, instantly ensnaring the bearded man in a haze of irresistible desire. He froze, his face flushing with pleasure, as though lost in the throes of an intoxicating dream. Shi Feng's gaze hardened. In a blur, he darted forward, his elongated black nails flashing like obsidian blades. With a single, swift stroke, he slashed across the man's throat. Blood spurted, and the cultivator crumpled to the ground, still wearing that blissful, stupefied smile. Shi Feng released a quiet sigh. Juliana's charm techniques never ceased to amaze him, especially when their targets were already under the sway of desire. As the next wave of assailants spilled into view, the fallen Soul King lay motionless behind them, a peaceful grin frozen on his lips. Shi Feng watched in silence as the onlookers' gazes locked onto Juliana's form. 5 spirit rings floated around her, and her transformation into a graceful fox spirit only amplified her allure. A hushed ripple of appreciation went through the crowd. "So she's a fox spirit," one man murmured. "I admit, I'm intrigued." Another laughed softly. "A Soul King, no less. Only a truly powerful female soul master could command such refinement." At that, Shi Feng's eyes flared with killing intent. The recent fall of a Soul King had failed to cow these men. If anything, it had fed their arrogance. Juliana lifted her veil in one fluid motion, revealing a face of such breathtaking beauty that every head turned, every breath caught. The instant her 4th spirit ring ignited, a potent illusion swept over the onlookers, magnifying every desire and binding their wills. Silently, Shi Feng descended upon them like a reaper made flesh. His mastery of corpse poison was absolute, a whisper-thin cut, and in seconds the venom turned flesh to ebony, sealing throats and stilling hearts. No scream escaped their lips, only the soft sigh of life slipping away. When the dust settled, Shi Feng was already at Juliana's side, and she had drawn her veil back down as if nothing had happened. Around them lay a dozen bodies, every corpse blackened by the toxin. Yet their faces bore strange, peaceful smiles, as though they had died in the throes of some exquisite ecstasy. Shi Feng half-dragged Juliana back into the hotel lobby, just as several Soul Kings staggered to their feet outside. Their hearts burned with a deadly corruption, the corpse poison eating them alive in agonizing spasms. Those who had rushed forward in an attempt to help collapsed within heartbeats, their high cultivation counts for nothing against this insidious toxin. Inside, Shi Feng and Juliana slid into a booth as everyone else edged away, eyes wide with terror. The few remaining guests whispered among themselves, no one dared approach. Even the waiter hesitated at their table, trembling as he laid down menus, the old fear in his gaze impossible to conceal. Gradually, other patrons returned, clutching Bloody Marys as though they held a talisman against the horror outside. Shi Feng watched them file past, their glances flicking anxiously to the lobby doors. He leaned forward, voice low to Juliana. "There must be dozens of high-level fighters out there by now, all seeking admission to the killing capital." Juliana's brow furrowed. "In just one day?" Shi Feng nodded. "And that number's only going to climb." They fell silent, waiting amid the hotel's uneasy hush. Nearly an hour slipped by before the hotel manager finally appeared, his face ashen as he hurried toward their table. "Mr. Shi." "Miss Hu," he began breathlessly. "There's been an emergency outside. What can I do for you?" Shi Feng met his gaze steadily. "First, lock down the lobby. No one leaves until we sort this out." The manager's nod was automatic, eyes darting to the windows as he prepared to brace the doors against whatever horrors still lurked beyond. Hulina exhaled softly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Now they waited, for answers, for reinforcements, or for the next wave of terror to descend. Chapter 142, Arrival at the Killing Capital. "Everyone, this way," the hotel manager called, striding through the lobby. About 30 practitioners, some at late opening, others just breaking into mastery, fell in behind him. Shi Feng and Hulina were among the group. The instant Hulina stepped into view, dozens of covetous gazes zeroed in on her. Yet nobody dared lay a finger on her here. The killing capital's main hub enforced strict rules. To ensure no one could harass them, Shi Feng and Hulina quietly activated their soul shields, cutting off all unwanted sensory intrusion. With so many people around, an outright brawl would only slow everyone down. Though Shi Feng's outward expression remained calm, his mind pulsed with deadly intent. Once they penetrated deeper into the capita, of killing, no one would escape his retribution. For now, however, he tolerated the stares and whispered comments. As the procession moved down the corridor, a few brazen disciples slipped through the crowd to linger at Hulina's side. Her effortless grace and subtle charm set their pulses racing. None dared openly molest her, but they murmured among themselves, "Just play it cool, don't start a fight, we'll see what happens later." Shi Feng's eyes flicked over them. Let them think they can wait him out. Soon enough, every one of these presumptuous fools would learn the true meaning of fear in the killing capital. For now, they had to follow the rules, but when the moment was right, he would unleash his full power. Shi Feng's gaze darkened. He slipped his arms around Hulina's waist and fell back just half a step, unleashing the soul sect's chilling aura and a frigid wave of murderous intent. The pack of leering onlookers stiffened. Their earlier bravado faded, replaced by a spark of fear. Any man who could radiate such lethal intent must have spilled rivers of blood. A burly ruffian stepped forward and jeered, "Kid, let's see how long you can protect her. I've heard there's no law in the killing capital. Can't wait to see your face when they torture your woman right in front of you." Laughter, harsh and mocking, rippled around them. The men pressed on, shoving past Shi Feng and Hulina, their eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. Shi Feng's heart pounded with rage. He'd remember every insult. He recalled Tang San's plan, tunneling through a back alley shop to slip inside unnoticed. But in the killing capital, the city's knights would thwart any underground breach. He couldn't be sure Hulina could overpower those enforcers on her own. Silently, he vowed, no matter what it took, he would keep her safe. Shi Feng took a steady breath, and at last resolved to enter the killing capital by its own bloody rules. Hulina leaned into him, still tingling from the protective sweep of his arm a moment before. Her heart swelled with warmth. Suddenly, the looming trials ahead felt distant and unthreatening. All she could think of was Shi Feng. She turned, as if to rest her head on his shoulder, but he quietly slipped free of her embrace and set off again. "Come on, junior sister," he called over his shoulder, voice calm and unhurried. Hulina's pout deepened, her fierce resentment more dramatic than a scorned widow's. She stamped her foot, then hurried after him. The innkeeper led the small contingent through narrow alleys until they arrived at a broad, walled courtyard. He paused at the entrance and surveyed the gathering. Over 30 challengers stood assembled, each waiting for the next order. Shi Feng's heart sank as the innkeeper's voice cut through the tense silence. "This is your last chance. Anyone who wants to leave can turn back now." Not a single soul moved. All these refugees had fled to the slaughter capital seeking sanctuary. They weren't going to abandon their chance at safety. Shi Feng glanced around at the others, gaunt faces etched with exhaustion and fear, yet none dared protest or make for the door. The innkeeper must have expected this reaction. In his years running the inn, he'd never met anyone cruel enough to turn away from a chance at refuge. Outside, the horrors of the slaughter capital were only rumors. Most had heard that the city would protect them, but few understood the deadly trials within. Only 2 people in the past 100 years, Tang Hao and Bibi Dong, had ever emerged alive. Everyone else who'd gone inside either never returned or had returned changed, broken by the capital's merciless laws. Even the innkeeper knew little. He'd sent countless patrons into the city, yet none had come back. He could sense only that the rules they'd face inside were unimaginably cruel. He fell silent, then pressed a discreet latch in the floorboards. With a grinding click, a section of the floor slid open, revealing a yawning pit. It was nearly noon. Daylight streamed through the high windows, but this cavernous hole swallowed every ray of light. Shi Feng and the others leaned forward to peer in. The abyss yawned beneath them, pitch black and unfathomably deep. A frigid draft rose from the depths, carrying with it a faint metallic scent that made Shi Feng's skin prickle. Voices faltered into hushed murmurs. No one knew what waited below, but once they stepped inside, there would be no turning back. Shi Feng's pulse hammered in his ears as he braced himself for the unknown. A frigid wind rose from the depths below, carrying a faint, bloody stench as though exhaled by hell itself. Shi Feng's eyes cut through the gloom, revealing that the black void wasn't as deep as it first appeared. Around him, the other entrants unleashed their mental powers to probe the drop. Few dared risk a careless leap. Yet one by one, nearly 30 figures sprang into the darkness, disappearing from view and leaving only Shi Feng, Hulina, and a third companion at the edge. Now! Shi Feng grabbed Hulina's elbow, and together they dove into the void. Above them, the hotel manager's smug face flickered in the dim light. With a sly smile, he reached for a concealed mechanism, and the yawning hole snapped shut. After a 10-meter fall, they thudded onto a hard, unyielding floor. Pitch black surrounded them, only Shi Feng's mental awareness cut through the covering shadow. In an instant, he located the only exit, a narrow corridor slanting downward, wisps of icy aura drifting from its mouth. Hulina drew a steadying breath, her own psychic senses mapping the corridor's gloom. The rest had already vanished into that tunnel. "We should go," Shi Feng murmured, offering her his hand. Hulina nodded, her eyes sharp and alert. "Stay close, and be careful." Side by side, they stepped into the corridor, the chill air pressing in as if eager to swallow them whole. Shi Feng tightened his grip on Hulina's soft, jade-like hand. She shivered ever so slightly, but it wasn't from fear. Rather, his firm hold brought her a sweet sense of security. Dozens of figures had been watching them from the shadows, and if any of them tried to spring an ambush inside, a fight would be inevitable. "It's all right," Shi Feng murmured, though his mind remained on high alert. Silently, he activated his Eye of God's punishment. The boulders and rubble that had blocked his line of sight dissolved from his vision. Piece by piece, he could now see clearly for hundreds of meters. No hidden assassins, no lurking threats. Satisfied, he pushed the ability even further, revealing a descending tunnel stretching a full 1,000 meters to a vast open plain, at the center of which lay a sprawling, blackened city. Reluctantly, Shi Feng closed the supernatural Godhood. The Eye of God's punishment might not draw on his soul itself, but it consumed a tremendous amount of mental energy. Just a few seconds of use had drained him more than he liked to admit. Lowering his eyes, he turned back to Hulina, tucking away the vision for the moment. Whatever lay ahead in that dark city could wait. First, they had to move on, and they had to move carefully. Shi Feng and his companion clasped hands, their pace urgent. He tried to dispel his spirit, but the faint glow of his spirit ring remained on his finger, proof they were still within Slaughter City's borders. After nearly a kilometer of hurried steps, they came upon a half-open stone gate. Shi Feng felt the presence of their entire group waiting just beyond it. No sooner had they passed through than the massive gate slammed shut behind them with a thunderous boom. Before them stood not only the 30 familiar faces, but also a line of 100 soldiers clad in black armor, each gripping a heavy sword. At their head, a commander sat astride a towering warhorse, his piercing gaze sweeping over the newcomers. In a voice as cold and unyielding as steel, he intoned, "Welcome to the capital of slaughter. This is the heart of hell, a world bathed in blood." Chapter 143, Fierce Battle. Here, you will receive anything you desire, so long as you're willing to pay the price with your life. a dark voice echoed across the vast expanse. Before them stood a towering knight clad in black plate armor that seemed to drink in every sliver of light. He bowed once, clean and precise. "I am Scott, the Dread Knight. I will guide you through the final trial to enter the killing capital." With that, Scott vaulted onto a colossal warhorse whose thunderous hooves sent tremors down the cobblestone road. 2 ranks of 100 soldiers flanked the route, their spears glinting and faces impassive. Shi Feng met their cold gazes without a flicker of fear. Gripping Hu Lina's hand, he stepped forward. A few of their companions trembled, on the verge of running. But under the soldiers' unwavering stares, all thoughts of retreat died away. The ground before them stretched endlessly into shadow. Since awakening, Shi Feng's night vision had grown astonishingly sharp. He could see clearly over 1,000 meters. There, on the horizon, loomed the Black City, its walls impossibly thick, its turrets like silent sentinels. Floating above it was a single purple moon, its eerie glow turning the encroaching darkness into something almost tangible. Hu Lina blinked, trying to adjust her eyes, but even she could discern the city's jagged silhouette. Shi Feng swept his gaze across the field and spotted other teams arrayed just like theirs, each squad tense with anticipation, each fate hanging on the trial to come. The final test had begun. Elsewhere, a squad of soldiers was ushering another group of hopefuls toward a second entrance into the killing capital. Shi Feng observed the steady stream of new arrivals and thought, so there isn't just one way, and people from all over town are coming through. Before long, every team had gathered at the rendezvous point. Shi Feng glanced over the assembled warriors. Roughly 300 of them had come to Slaughter City today. At last, they halted before a colossal arena just outside the city walls. The circular pit stretched 30 meters across and stood 2 meters high. Its blood-red surface seemed to glisten in the dying light, and even the soil a good 10 meters beyond the walls had turned a rusty maroon, as if centuries of combat had soaked into it. Sir Scott, the infamous, ice-hearted knight, urged his steed to a stop and wheeled around. He spoke only 3 words, his voice colder than steel. "Step forward." A ripple of excitement surged through the crowd. Clearly, they would have to prove themselves in this ring before earning the right to enter Slaughter City. Shi Feng slipped his hand into Hu Lina's. She'd endured a month of brutal training to reach this point, yet he couldn't banish the worry in his chest. Hu Lina met his concerned gaze and offered him a reassuring grin. Since arriving in the killing capital's territory, Shi Feng had gradually shed his reserve. Once he'd kept her at arm's length, but now he'd drawn close of his own accord. That change in his demeanor filled her with a quiet, joyful confidence. "Don't worry, senior sister. I'm no pacifist," Hu Lina said with a confident grin, shaking Shi Feng's hand firmly. By now, several contestants had already stepped onto the circular platform, though most still lingered hesitantly in the stands. A cold, commanding voice suddenly rang out across the arena. "Anyone who wishes to enter the killing capital, step forward now. Those who refuse will die." Shi Feng glanced around. Arrayed at the edge of the ring stood a handful of towering figures, each radiating immense soul energy. 8 glowing soul rings adorned their arms, proof they were all Contra-level powerhouses. Their murderous auras pressed in like a tightening noose. Shi Feng gave Hu Lina a determined nod. "Let's go." He led her onto the raised dais. In no time, more than 300 challengers filled the platform. Moments later, a massive knight climbed the steps and surveyed the crowd. In a thunderous voice, he announced, "Over 300 of you stand here. When the dust settles, only 30 will advance into the killing capital. Fight, and may the strongest survive." Shi Feng's heart sank. The knights intended to pit all 300 combatants against one another at once, whittling them down to just 30 survivors. Shi Feng's grip on Hu Lina's hand tightened until his knuckles went white. He lowered his voice, desperate. "Please, stay with me." They stood in the center of a 30-meter-wide arena packed with over 300 combatants. Every inch of space felt claustrophobic. At any moment, someone could be surrounded and cut down. Shi Feng knew how ruthless these matches could be, and without Hu Lina by his side, he'd be at a grave disadvantage. Voices erupted around them. "I protest. I paid for a Bloody Mary. Why should I share an opponent? I protest, too." But nobody was listening. As soon as the call to begin sounded, the arena exploded into violence. The sickening pop of blades slicing through flesh echoed off the walls. A man next to them crumpled, blood blossoming across his chest. Even as bodies dropped, the survivors pressed on, undeterred. Shi Feng and Hu Liena exchanged a tense glance. Summoning their martial souls, streams of power flared around them. Yet, to their shock, no spirit rings formed in the air. Slaughter City's suppression field, Shi Feng muttered, noting the phenomenon they'd heard rumors about. Every soul skill here was dampened, every spirit ring hidden from view. Hu Liena's eyes narrowed. Then we're on equal footing, but where are our rings? Shi Feng forced himself to focus. The ring was closing in on a dozen fighters now, each battle growing more desperate by the second. No spirit rings meant they'd have to rely on raw skill and quick thinking if they hoped to survive this slaughterhouse. And more than that, he couldn't let Hu Liena slip away. He drew a steady breath, tightened his grip on her hand, and stepped forward into the fray. Where have my soul abilities gone? A man's scream cut off mid-shout when a razor-sharp claw burst through his chest and gripped his still-pounding heart. In the same instant, a sword flashed, severing another head. A boot crushed a skull. Someone else was split clean in two. In less than a heartbeat, dozens of combatants lay dead across the arena floor. It didn't take long for everyone to realize the soul rings were being suppressed. Magic and soul skills simply wouldn't work. After the initial shock, a grim determination took hold. This fight would be decided by pure, unadulterated strength. At the center of the carnage, Shi Feng and Hu Liena stood back to back, several bodies strewn at their feet. Hu Liena's long sword danced through the air with terrifying precision, every strike lethal. Shi Feng's own weapons were his claws, sharper than any blade, his muscles rippling beneath his skin, his speed a blur. No one could summon firestorms or psychic blasts here, only hand-to-hand combat counted. Shi Feng leapt forward, his claws slashing through armor and sinew. As he fought, he sensed strange fluctuations of soul power in those he'd felled. A few had radiated an almost imperial aura, at least Soul Emperor level, if not higher. But none of that saved them in this brutal, skill-forged arena. Every advantage, every ounce of strength, was contested blade to claw in a contest of pure martial prowess, and Shi Feng and Hu Liena were proving themselves among the fiercest warriors here. Shi Feng's reputation as the Soul Emperor preceded him, even beyond these walls, but in this arena, legends go to die. No sooner had he stepped onto the raised platform than his overwhelming power sent ripples of panic through the crowd. Fighters on the ring's edge scrambled backward, and several, eyes wide with terror, actually leapt toward freedom, only to be met by a wall of frozen steel. 100 guards bristled around the ring, spears raised in a deadly perimeter. Beyond them, half a dozen soul wielders, renowned contramasters, stood ready, their aura crackling. Between the two lines of soldiers and soul mages, escape was impossible. Shi Feng barely registered the traps. His focus snapped to Hu Liena. A sliver of movement, a hint of imminent peril, he tensed. And then it happened. A massive, jet-black sledgehammer tore through the air, aimed squarely at Hu Liena's head. With no time to hesitate, she brought her longsword up to block. The collision sounded like thunder. The hammer's force sent her blade skittering aside as if it were made of paper. The ring erupted in shouts. Shi Feng lunged forward, muscles coiled to strike, his eyes burning with fierce determination. Whether they called him Soul Emperor or Executioner, he would not let Hu Liena fall. Page 189. A 2-meter-tall giant loomed before them, his limbs coated in coarse black hair and his arms as thick as tree trunks. In his massive hands, he swung a jet-black sledgehammer straight at Hu Liena's unprotected head. Shi Feng's heart lurched. Reacting in an instant, he spun around, yanked Hu Liena behind him with his left arm, and thrust his right fist upward to block the blow. A shockwave of soul power pulsed from their assailant, an overwhelmingly potent aura that marked him as a soul sage. Soul sages were virtually unheard of in the killing capital. One turning up here was beyond anyone's expectations. There was no time to hesitate. Deep within Shi Feng's chest, the forbidden corpse pill awakened, flooding him with raw, surging energy. He unleashed that power into his martial soul, and in an instant, his strength multiplied fivefold. Beside him, Hu Liena's veil tumbled free, revealing her pale face twisted in terror. She was a seasoned soul sage herself. There was no doubt she couldn't have withstood that hammer. Yet here was Shi Feng, jaw clenched, fist braced, determined to shield her from the full force of the impact. Chapter 144. Entering the capital of slaughter. She spun around, intent on pulling Shi Feng to safety, but it was too late. His fist had already met the jet-black giant hammer head-on. Clang! The deafening crash echoed through the arena, unleashing a violent shockwave. Spectators nearby clutched their ears, pain flashing across their faces as they stared in stunned horror. On the surface, the soul energy flowing from Shi Feng registered at only the soul sect level. Yet in that instant, his raw power became truly fearsome. The colossal hammer, descending with overwhelming force, recoiled the moment it struck his punch. The massive warrior's expression shifted in disbelief, the sheer impact threatening to wrench the Wuhun great hammer from his grasp. With a newfound respect gleaming in his eyes, the giant fighter gave Shi Feng one last once-over, then leaped toward another corner of the battlefield and resumed his ruthless slaughter. "Feng, are you all right?" Huliena's voice trembled, tears brimming in her beautiful eyes as she rushed forward. Shi Feng released his murderous aura without restraint. His feral gaze swept across the arena, compelling everyone to look away rather than meet his eyes. "Don't worry, I'm fine." After the last impact, Shi Feng felt only a dull numbness in his arm, not the slightest cause for alarm. The so-called soul saint he'd faced, stripped of his soul skill, turned out to be far weaker than legend had claimed. Shi Feng flexed his fingers, then offered his hand to Huliena. "Come with me, I'll teach them a lesson they won't forget." His eyes went ice-cold. He still remembered the lecherous brutes who had tried to violate Huliena earlier. If a soul saint's blow barely scratched him, no challenger in this arena had any chance. Huliena's dark eyes shimmered with gratitude and something more. Side by side, they stepped into the ring. A ripple of astonishment spread through the crowd. Her famed beauty, lithe and fox-like, drew every gaze. Overconfident strongmen surged forward, eager to crowd her with unwanted advances. But Shi Feng was ready. With no warning, he unleashed a torrent of strikes, each blow infused with potent venom. Bones cracked beneath his iron fists, panicked screams cut the air. Those who stumbled back found themselves racked by poison, muscles seizing as they collapsed to the sand. A handful managed to crawl away, only to be finished off moments later. When the dust settled, challengers lay scattered and broken. Breathing heavily, Shi Feng planted himself protectively in front of Huliena. Not a man remained standing. Only then did the arena fall silent, the crowd stunned into awed hush. Huliena exhaled, relief washing over her face. She met Shi Feng's gaze, gratitude, and something deeper shining in her eyes. In that instant, neither of them doubted where their path would lead next. In just a few minutes, fewer than 100 fighters remained on the arena floor. Shattered shields, broken limbs, and discarded weapons lay scattered across the blood-spattered sand. Huliena, her sword arm trembling, had never witnessed combat this fierce. Each swing of her blade was heavy with fear, yet she forced herself onward, heart-pounding. Shi Feng's eyes cut through the chaos like twin blades. Earlier, he'd intercepted the one brute who'd tried to take advantage of Huliena. And ever since, the other combatants had fallen one by one to his unstoppable onslaught. His resilience and skill had become legendary in this pit of bloodlust, and now no one dared challenge him. They skulked to the fringes, waiting for him to tire, praying this living legend would finally falter. With Huliena at his side, Shi Feng took a long, determined stride toward the lone figure lurking at the edge of the arena. The man's face went ashen the moment he recognized Shi Feng's approach. His hands shook, sweat gleamed on his brow. He had watched Shi Feng cut down dozens in mere minutes, and now, as Shi Feng closed the distance, his terror threatened to overwhelm him. "Stay close," Shi Feng whispered to Huliena, sword raised and ready. There was no mercy in his eyes, only the cold certainty of victory. The last challenger swallowed hard, realizing this fight was already lost. With a decisive step forward, Shi Feng prepared to end the battle once and for all. Shi Feng watched with cold detachment as the men who had molested Huliena met their grisly end by his hand. Panic clawed at his heart as he pressed himself into a corner, convinced he was next. Around him, every cultivator in the area fled at Shi Feng's approach, everywhere but here. He alone remained, paralyzed by terror. He was a Soul King, a rank few could attain, but Shi Feng's reputation was deadly. Several Soul Kings and even a Soul Emperor had already fallen to those fists. Now, knees hitting the ground, he raised his hands in desperate supplication. "Brother, please have mercy. I'll do anything you ask." Shi Feng's gaze was like ice. "I don't want your promises." His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. Before the man could even blink, Shi Feng's fist rocketed forward and crashed into his skull. The force alone would scramble any mind. "Finish him," Shi Feng ordered. A gurgling gasp escaped the kneeling cultivator's lips as hope flickered in his eyes, but Shi Feng showed no pity. His fist struck again with ruthless precision, shattering what remained of the man's brain in a merciless, decisive blow. A cold, murderous aura slammed into Shi Feng. He looked up to see one of the Contras, the very one who had unleashed that deadly presence upon him. Shi Feng lifted his chin, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Hulana's heart pounded in her chest. Around the arena, spectators exchanged knowing glances. No matter whether Shi Feng possessed any soul skills, the knight of the Contra Order standing before him was unquestionably the most powerful presence here. If Shi Feng had in any way offended this warrior, the consequences could have been ruinous. For a long, tense moment, the knight's oppressive aura washed over Shi Feng before it finally receded. Then, his deep voice thundered across the arena. "Congratulations! 29 of you have qualified to enter the slaughter capital." A ripple of emotion spread through the crowd. There was relief and excitement, for 29 challengers had won their passage to the feared slaughter city. And there was disappointment, too, because Shi Feng had not received the knight's sanction. A youth capable of matching such a formidable opponent was a threat they would all rather not face in the capital. Hulina exhaled in relief and squeezed Shi Feng's hand. He returned her gesture with a calm smile, though the icy grip of fear he'd felt under the Contra Knight's aura had been very real. But now that the knight's verdict was final, there was nothing to be gained from trembling. The future lay ahead, and Shi Feng would meet it head-on. The formidable Contras had fallen back, and the towering Knight Scott issued a cold command. "The rest of you, follow me into the killing capital." A little over 20 riders exchanged glances, then leapt down from the circular platform. "Let's move," Shi Feng said with a faint smile. As he stepped away, he glanced back at the ring's surface. Deep grooves carved into the stone were filling with rushing blood, tracing out a dark, ominous pattern, though the corpses strewn across the ring kept most of the design hidden. Shi Feng frowned. He suspected this gruesome symbol might be one of the sources for the Bloody Mary apparitions plaguing the realm, but he wisely kept the thought to himself. He didn't want to give Juliana any reason to turn green with nausea. Scott led them to the great black gate of the city, then dismounted and held up a small iron plaque. "This token marks you as cleared to enter the killing capital. Keep it on you at all times. Someone will meet you inside the gate." Eager to get inside, Shi Feng barely waited for an invitation. He accepted the plaque and studied its design, a skull engraved in the center, with a serial number stamped beneath. His read, Juliana's read. With that confirmation in hand, they strode forward into the shadows of the city. "Let's go in." Shi Feng and Juliana fell in behind the steady stream of arrivals, stepping beneath the forbidding arch of the gate. 4 immense characters loomed above. City of Slaughter. A cold knot formed in Shi Feng's stomach as he passed beneath them. On either side of the entrance, 2 rows of black-armored warriors stood at rigid attention, their halberds gleaming dully in the torchlight. Ahead of Shi Feng, a veiled woman in flowing ebony robes guided the newcomers forward without a word, her measured pace parting the crowd. Then another attendant appeared, a slender young woman also clad in black, her face half hidden behind a silk veil. Her graceful figure caught Shi Feng's eye, though in his mind she still paled beside Hulina's natural elegance. She stepped directly before him, lifting the veil just enough for her bright eyes to meet his. The moment she saw his tall, upright frame and handsome features, her eyes lit up with delight. "Welcome to the City of Slaughter," she said, her voice warm and inviting. With a delicate gesture, she turned and beckoned them further into the city's dark streets. Chapter 145, The Chaotic Inner City. Shi Feng slipped his hand into Huliena's and said firmly, "We're together." Only then did the other girl glance over at Juliana. She paused, blinking in surprise at Juliena's flawless poise and effortless grace. A faint twinge of envy crossed her features. She'd be, and so focused on Shi Feng a moment ago that she hadn't even noticed his companion. "All right," the girl said, turning sharply toward the city gates. "Follow me." Shi Feng and Juliana fell into step behind her, weaving through the throng of residents and merchants. As they walked, Juliana leaned close and whispered, "Don't ogle her rear." Shi Feng flashed a wry grin. "Then may I ogle yours?" With a quick, playful pinch to his arm, Juliana blushed but murmured, "Fine." Shi Feng raised his hands in mock surrender. "All right, forget I asked." He couldn't decide whether to laugh or groan. Juliana's generosity never ceased to surprise him. They halted before a tall, armored envoy standing beside the city's checkpoint. His dark cloak bore an emblem emblazoned with a stylized blade. "I am the envoy of the King of Slaughter," he announced in a clear, commanding voice. "I will serve as your guide and your explainer for the next 12 hours. During this period, you may ask me any questions about what you see or hear. This window also counts as your novice protection phase. As long as you remain within 5 meters of me, your safety is guaranteed." Shi Feng glanced at Juliana. "Well then, let's get started. After 12 hours, you'll officially be sworn into the slaughter capital. This will be your home from now on." The guide girl glanced back at Shi Feng as she spoke. Her bright eyes kept darting to his face, drawn not by curiosity about another runaway, but by the calm dignity he exuded. He was nothing like the depraved, lust-driven denizens who roamed this place. She'd lived here for years, yet had never encountered someone so composed, so untouched by their debauchery. Involuntarily, her pulse quickened. 12 hours alone with him. She let her mind wander through the possibilities. Then she caught sight of Juliana. The moment her eyes met the senior sister's cool, watchful gaze, every daring thought evaporated. How could she hope to seduce Shi Feng with such a stunning protector standing guard? Juliana's scrutiny sharpened. When she noticed the faint spark of longing in the girl's eyes, her lips curved into a warning smirk. Shi Feng was her junior brother, her only charge, and she wouldn't allow anyone to treat him as a prize to be claimed. Under Juliana's fierce protection, no one in the Slaughter Capital would dare cross that line. Had she not been the Slaughter King's envoy, Juliana wouldn't have been able to hold back. She hated seeing any man insult Shi Feng, and she would never tolerate another woman trying to curry favor with him. Slipping closer to him, she vowed silently not to let the envoy out of her sight. Up ahead, the woman in black moved with quiet purpose, her dark cloak brushing the ground. After a moment, she glanced back, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Sir," she said, tilting her head, "is there nothing you'd like to ask before we proceed?" Shi Feng met her gaze coolly. "Take us directly into the inner city." He knew the city's protocols. There was no need for her to belabor the point. Still, she lifted an eyebrow. "Are you sure? I'd advise you to stay in the outer city a while longer. It's safer to learn your way around before attempting the inner district." "Lead on," Shi Feng replied, his voice steady. Juliana shot the envoy a triumphant look, as though to say, "Your flattery won't sway him." The envoy gave a small, unreadable smile and resumed her silent march toward the looming city gates. "Since you're bent on courting death, I won't stop you." The girl snorted in dismissal, then spun on her heel and strode away. Shi Feng exchanged a glance with Juliana before following. Just ahead, leaning against a rusted railing, was someone who looked more skeleton than man. His skin was stretched taut over every bone. He seemed so near death that one gust of wind might blow him away. Yet his hollow eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger as he watched the newcomers approach. "Heh!" he rasped, voice barely above a whisper. "Fresh meat and a new Bloody Mary, eh?" The sound was both mocking and oddly excited. Who is that?" Juliana frowned, stepping closer instinctively. The girl glanced over her shoulder without slowing. "You'll find plenty of people like him inside the inner city. Life there isn't as forgiving as you might think. You must watch your back every second. Sneak attacks happen without warning, and every year there's a bloodbath in the killing fields. 99 out of every 100 newcomers won't last 3 days." She paused, then added, "Out in the outer city, At least killing is regulated. Step inside those gates, though, and it's every person for themselves. With that, she turned back toward the gates, leaving Shi Feng and Hulina to steel themselves for what lay ahead. Those without strength are forced to stay in the outer city, eking out a living by donating 2 pints of blood every month. Hulina bristled. "You're looking down on us." The girl shrugged. "I'm not trying to insult you, I'm just stating the facts." Before Hulina could retort, Shi Feng stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. "We don't belong to that bottom percentile you warned us about. Now lead us into the inner city." The guide said nothing more. She turned on her heel and resumed awakens. As they followed, Shi Feng and Hulina passed dozens of gaunt figures huddled in narrow alleyways. These people clung to the uncertain safety of the outer city, willing to bleed twice a month so they'd never dare set foot inside the inner walls. The sight was grim proof of how perilous the inner city had become. Hulina's features hardened as she watched the hollow-eyed residents. "To enter the inner city," she murmured, "you'd better be on constant guard. One wrong move, and you'll never walk out again." Shi Feng nodded, his expression unreadable. They pressed on through winding, dimly lit streets. The air grew thicker, the walls higher. After another half-hour of tense silence, the girl halted before an imposing stone rampart. She pointed to a narrow gate set into the wall. "This is your last stop." Shi Feng and Hulina exchanged a glance. Beyond the gate lay the inner city, a place of both promise and peril. With a steadying breath, Shi Feng stepped forward, the gate's heavy doors creaking open to swallow them in shadow. The wall before them wasn't particularly tall, barely 10 meters high, and beyond it lay the inner district of the killing capital. The girl in black pressed on without a word, abandoning any further attempts to talk. Shi Feng out of following her. Then, over her shoulder, she finally said, "There are no guards inside. Anyone from the outer city can come in if they have the nerve. Once we're through the gate, stay within 5 meters of me, or I can't guarantee your safety." Shi Feng and Hulina exchanged a glance, then stepped boldly after her. The instant they passed beneath the archway, the world they'd known outside fell away. If the outer city had felt cold, dead, and empty, the inner district pulsed with unrestrained opulence and lunacy. Wide boulevards thronged with people, every face bathed in the glow of countless colored lanterns and neon signs. A dizzying assault of sights, smells, and uproarious voices crashed into them, and before they'd even taken 3 steps, eerie, unidentifiable sounds crept in on the edges of their hearing. "Could you please provide the full text of the chapter you'd like rewritten? I'll then revise it into a polished, idiomatic English version, renaming Jiang Chen to Shi Feng and ensuring he's clearly male, while preserving all key plot points and details." Shi Feng and Hulina came to an abrupt stop, both startled by the woman in front who'd slowed her pace, no doubt afraid they might abandon her. A guttural cry of agony pierced the air. Shi Feng and Hulina turned to see a huge man dragging a well-built woman by the hair, hammering blow after blow without mercy. Each strike landed with bone-shaking force. The woman's feeble sobs were all she could manage between the relentless punishment. Even more horrifying, the surrounding spectators cheered the assailant on. Hulina's face drained of color. Her fingers dug into Shi Feng's arm so tightly it hurt. She'd read about or imagined such brutality before, but confronting it in person was a different matter altogether. Terror and revulsion churned within her, and she wrenched her gaze away, unable to watch any longer. Yet when she glanced to the side, her blood ran cold. A man smeared head to toe in crimson was calmly chewing on something in his hand, an arm severed at the wrist. Their eyes met. He lifted his head and offered her a gruesome grin, the fingers and bone fragments glistening between his teeth. Shi Feng steadied Hulina as she doubled over, her stomach churning until she retched a mouthful of bitter liquid onto the dusty street. Even he winced at the sight. Holding her trembling hand, he murmured, "The inner city isn't kind. It chews people up and spits their bones back out. You shouldn't be here. Too late to turn back now, though." The woman in black, walking just ahead of them, glanced over her shoulder. "No one leaves once they cross this gate," she said coolly. "You'll survive only by your own strength." Shi Feng noticed the hungry stares fixed on Hulina. Her unnerving, almost hypnotic charm had set several onlookers' pulses racing, but none dared act while the mysterious woman in black hovered nearby. "We need to find lodging," Shi Feng said softly, guiding Huliana away from prying eyes. The woman shrugged. "There are no rules in this district. Take any house you can seize. If you've got the power, claim it." Her tone was flat, no hint of hospitality in her voice. Shi Feng caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes. She'd expected more from him, he realized, perhaps more cunning, or at least more backbone. Instead, she saw only a good-looking fool. Silence fell as they moved deeper into the twisting alleys of the inner city, Huliana leaning heavily on Shi Feng's arm and the woman in black striding just ahead, her disappointment cloaking them like a shadow. Shi Feng didn't hesitate. "So where can we find the best houses in the inner city?" The guide girl gave him a contemptuous look, as if he'd asked a foolish question. "Listen carefully," she replied, her tone frosty. "Every desirable residence here is already claimed by someone far stronger than you, at least sole emperor rank, each with a brutal record on the bloodfields of hell. Do you really intend to take them on?" Shi Feng frowned at her insolence, but kept his voice calm. "Lead the way." She sneered inwardly at his arrogance, but dared not shirk her duty. With a dismissive flick of her wrist, she ushered Shi Feng and Huliana deeper into Slaughter City's most opulent district, eager to see how this presumptuous pair planned to wrest property from such formidable owners. As they passed through the gates, an astonishing scene unfolded before them. Marble promenades glinted beneath stained glass domes, while gilded window frames reflected the afternoon sun. Glittering spires rose on every side, and lush gardens bloomed between mansions whose high walls were draped in exotic vines. It was a decadent display of wealth, yet beneath the splendor lay something far more unsettling. Blood sport thrived openly in the streets. Men and women, unarmed or bearing only crude blades, clashed at random in fierce brawls for sport and profit. Spectators formed tight circles, wagering on winners as blows rained down. The air rang with shrieks and snarls, and in one particularly gruesome skirmish, two burly fighters abandoned all pretense of humanity, roaring, earing at each other with wild animal ferocity. Huliana's face went ashen, and she staggered, nearly retching at the carnage. Shi Feng swallowed hard, his own complexion paling. He'd expected danger, but the city's blood-soaked excess was far more monstrous than he had imagined. Still, he squared his shoulders and pressed on. This was Slaughter City, and if he truly wanted a home here, there was no turning back. Huliana's face twisted with disgust as she watched. "Men are truly filthy creatures," she spat, shooting Shi Feng a venomous glare. He met her look with a wry smile, but said nothing in reply. The girl in black led the way in stony silence. Shi Feng fell in beside Huliana, and after another half-hour of brisk walking, they arrived at a wealthy residential district. Unlike the shabby cottages on the outskirts, these were elegant, standalone villas, 2 or 3 floors each, lined up behind tall wrought-iron gates. The streets here were orderly, but every passerby exuded a chilling, powerful aura, their eyes hard and unwelcoming. By the faint spiritual radiance lingering around them, Shi Feng judged they were at least mid-level fighters. Several, no doubt, ranked even higher. Since Shi Feng had deliberately adopted such a frosty demeanor, the girl in black said nothing more. After all, once he'd thrown down the gauntlet and invited danger, there was little she could do but follow. Shi Feng offered Huliana a warm smile as he took her hand. "Senior sister, which building would you like? I'll go secure it for us." A faint, distressed voice drifted over from up ahead. "I don't know how I'm going to survive." Neither Shi Feng nor Huliana paid the speaker any mind. Instead, Huliana surveyed the elegant district before them. They would be living here for the foreseeable future, so comfort mattered. Only those strong enough could claim a residence in this upscale enclave. The powerless were relegated to the dilapidated outskirts. At last, Juliana's gaze fixed on a small, all-white cottage tucked neatly among grander structures. It was by far the cleanest building in sight, exactly the sort of orderly space she craved. "This one," she said, pointing with her pale finger. "Page 193. "All right, I'll go fetch it for you right away," Shi Feng said with a confident smile. "I'll come with you." Juliana's voice trembled slightly. What if they ran into soul sages, or worse, Contras? Even without soul skills, a higher cultivation level meant tremendous soul power. Between Shi Feng's ability to handle a soul sage and her own support, she was fairly certain they'd be fine, but caution was never misplaced. They reached a small pavilion at the edge of the courtyard. Just as Shi Feng lifted his foot to step inside, a firm voice called out from the shadows. "Hold on a second," said the girl dressed in black. "That man in there is a soul emperor. His power is terrifying. He's already racked up numerous victories in Hellslaughter City, ranking him among the very top. If you stir him up, even you newcomers won't stand a chance." "I appreciate the warning," Shi Feng replied, nodding once. Her tone could be brusque, but her concern was genuine. He slipped an arm around Huliena's shoulders and led her into the pavilion. The girl in black hesitated for a heartbeat, then followed them inside. "You're so arrogant," the voice taunted. "Let's see if you can back up that arrogance." The moment Shi Feng and Huliena crossed the threshold of the small 3-story building, they heard the unexpected laughter of a woman. Huliena's complexion darkened at once. Her mind flashed back to the brutalized women they had passed on the street, and a fierce resolve to protect the innocent filled her. They climbed to the 2nd floor and froze at the sight before them. A spacious hall was littered with sturdy men, each ensnared in thick, silken threads that glimmered like spider silk, leaving them helpless and motionless. At the center of the room stood a strikingly alluring woman, pressing one of the captives to the floor. The man's movements were sluggish, his breath shallow and uneven, as though his strength was being siphoned away. Shi Feng scanned the other prisoners. All bore that same vacant, drained expression, their auras all but extinguished. Shi Feng's brow furrowed in disbelief. He'd never encountered such a cruel supernatural assault. Beside him, Huliena's cheeks flushed crimson, her eyes narrowing with righteous anger. Between the silken bonds and the predator at their center, it was clear they were walking into something far more sinister than a simple raid. Yet neither dared to move first, their hearts pounding with equal measures of fear and determination. Huliena had assumed the disheveled woman was the victim. But the moment Shi Feng and Huliena burst in, it became clear she'd been waiting for them all along. Unfazed by their arrival, she exuded total confidence, her formidable strength obvious even at a glance. Her dark eyes locked onto Shi Feng's face, brightening as though she'd discovered a rare treasure. With one arm she still held the battered man pinned to the floor, yet she smiled at Shi Feng with a teasing tilt of her head. "A handsome young man like you is hard to come by," she purred. The wounded man gasped as she released him. His aura, once strong, now flickered weakly. He was on the brink of death. Shi Feng's jaw clenched. "Cold as steel," he said. "This place is mine. Step aside." She laughed softly, the sound sultry and mocking. "Oh, little brother, I love how assertive you are." She began to glide toward him, her posture unabashedly provocative. Huliena's blood ran hot with fury. She drew her longsword in a single swift motion and thrust it toward the woman's chest. The blade gleamed as it cut through the dim light, intent on ending this seduction before it could begin. Chapter 147. Killing the Spider Lady Soul Emperor, Huliena's sword flashed through the air, but her opponent only laughed, a sultry, mocking sound that seemed to hang in the clearing. With liquid grace, the woman slipped aside, as if her body were made of silk rather than flesh. "What a ruthless little sister," she purred. "But you should know, I'm not interested in women." Before Huliena could recover, the woman's soul swept her long hair aside and struck with a palm as pale as moonlight. Shi Feng, watching from the edge of the fight, caught sight of a plume of black qi erupting from her hand. It hissed with the odor of poison. His eyes flicked to the ground, where faint webs clung to stones and roots. Clearly her martial soul was that of a venomous spider. Shi Feng lowered his stance and took a deliberate step back, ceding the battlefield to Huliena. She had consumed 2 celestial grasses and now bore complete immunity to toxins. This spider-woman's venom would do her no harm. By stepping aside, Shi Feng intended to give Huliena more real combat experience, and he remained mentally tethered to her every move, ready to intervene if she showed the slightest weakness. As the 2 women sparred, a figure draped in a black veil crept after them. From the top of a worn stone staircase, she froze when she caught sight of Shi Feng standing above them. his calm gaze fixed on the dangerous contest below. The battle had already begun, yet Shi Feng still stood on the sidelines, watching in silence. The woman beside him narrowed her eyes in disbelief. Does he really expect his own champion to face a Soul Emperor alone? Her respect for him, already fragile, plummeted. Shi Feng had boasted that he would personally ensure Hu Liena's victory and secure them this estate. Now he simply stood there, impassive. Frustrated, the woman in black climbed the shallow steps and settled beside him, her gaze fixed on the skirmish below. The grand hall offered more than enough room for combat, and there, under the glow of crystal chandeliers, Hu Liena clashed fiercely with the Soul Emperor. The Emperor's attire was scant and disordered. It was obvious she'd rushed into the fight without so much as a chance to straighten her garments. Even in the midst of battle, she exuded a dangerous, seductive allure. But Shi Feng paid her no heed. His attention was entirely on Hu Liena, whose every movement betrayed the confidence of a seasoned warrior. The woman in black watched, astonished, as Hu Liena's blades carved arcs of brilliant light through the air. Only then did she fully grasp the truth. Hu Liena was no mere mortal fighter. She was a Soul King-level powerhouse. And even more astounding, every drop of the Soul Emperor's infamous venomous curse, poison that had struck terror into the hearts of countless foes, had failed to faze Hu Liena. The lethal toxin splashed against Hu Liena's defenses, only to vanish without so much as a sting. For the first time, the woman in black turned to Shi Feng, genuine surprise in her eyes. He still stood motionless, yet his calm bore the unmistakable mark of confidence. Somewhere deep inside, she realized he already knew exactly how this duel would end. Shi Feng watched from the sidelines as Hu Liena's blade danced through the air. Over the past month, she'd absorbed every new technique he'd drilled into her, and her longsword had grown terrifyingly precise. Already the Soul Emperor before her was bleeding, each graceful parry and riposte leaving faint trails of crimson across her black armor. Even the cloaked woman watching nearby felt a flush of admiration at Hu Liena's skill. "Why aren't you helping her?" The cloaked woman snapped, eyes flashing. Shi Feng shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "Can't you see? She's only getting stronger. She's more than capable of handling this." No sooner had he spoken than Hu Liena shifted her weight, lunged in a sudden feint, and then slashed with full force. The Soul Emperor leapt back, but not quickly enough. A hefty chunk of flesh flew free, and she screamed, "You'll pay for that!" Her beautiful face contorted in rage, and from her wound poured a choking black vapor that snaked through the air. Hu Liena recoiled as the miasma stung her lungs. Then something even more horrifying happened. The Soul Emperor's neat, straight legs seemed to melt away, merging into a single gigantic orb of gray-black flesh below her abdomen. The transformation was grotesque, and for the first time, Shi Feng's confident smile faltered as he realized the true extent of their enemy's power. A massive orb hovered before them, its surface bristling with coarse hair and studded with fist-sized purple nodules. 4 jointed legs, each as thick as an adult's arm and nearly 2 meters long, sprang from its sides. Where you'd expect arms, 2 jet-black spears jutted out, their shafts rough with bristles and their tips glinting razor-sharp. The creature's face had swollen into a grotesque purple mask, every feature twisted into a visage of pure terror. "I am the Black Widow," it screeched, voice as chilling as a banshee's wail. Its bloodshot eyes bored into Hu Liena with undiluted hatred. "Never have I been so insulted. I'll make your life far worse than death." With that, the widow lunged, spears thrusting down at Hu Liena's head from over 3 meters up, an angle so steep it was nearly impossible to counter. Hu Liena barely managed to parry the twin strikes, steel ringing against obsidian points. Summoning every ounce of strength, she slashed at one of the widow's colossal legs. The blade bit in, but only scraped the hardened chitin, leaving a shallow gash. Sweat beaded on her brow, but she held her ground. Watching from a short distance, Shi Feng said nothing. He had every skill to join the fray, yet he remained silent. This battle was a priceless test for Hu Liena, pitting her will and skill against a truly formidable foe. With a sharp hiss, the woman's spear sliced through the air and tore at Hu Liena's tunic across her chest, the steel tip grazing her skin. Alarmed, Hu Liena stumbled backward. At that moment, The woman's swollen oval abdomen lifted like a hood, revealing a narrow, finger-width slit aimed squarely at her. Before Juliana could react, a milky white thread shot forth with a soft poof, unraveling into a web that lunged through the air toward her. This wasn't a soul skill, but the raw power of the spider marshal's soul she harbored, a fearsome gift that, alongside her potent venom, made it her deadliest weapon. The silk's adhesive grip and unyielding strength meant that anyone ensnared would have no hope of escape. Juliana's heart pounded as the web closed in. Just when she braced for capture, a second figure moved faster than the silk could weave. Shi Feng grabbed her arm and yanked her clear of danger, dragging her back up the stairs and out of the web's path. In that instant, Juliana realized how narrow her escape had been, and how crucial Shi Feng's timely intervention had become. Juliana still trembled in shock, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. The tear in her blouse from moments before left her exposed and off balance, and for a second, Shi Feng almost lost focus. He shook his head, cleared his thoughts, and advanced a few strong idiads toward the spider-woman standing before them. Barely glancing at her, Shi Feng already grasped her strengths and weaknesses. She wasn't especially powerful physically. Her true danger lay in the potent venom she wielded and the silky webs she spun, with a pair of spear-like forearms as her secondary weapons. Fortunately for him and Juliana, they had built up immunity to the deadliest toxins. Her webs, however, could entangle and immobilize anyone slow enough to be caught, though they were useless against Shi Feng's lightning-quick reflexes. "You two will die today," she snarled, launching herself forward with all 8 limbs coiled like springs. Shi Feng didn't bother summoning his martial soul or revealing his undead form. He simply sidestepped, then bounded with a single, fluid motion. Before she could react, he had already closed the gap and planted his foot against the oval carapace on her back. The Spider-Woman froze, stunned by his audacity and by how easily her blind spots had been exposed. She spun to defend herself, but it was too late. Shi Feng's momentum carried him fully onto her rear, upsetting her balance entirely. Shi Feng landed squarely on the smooth oval platform, the terrified woman pinned beneath him. Frantically, she swung her arms at him, but the sphere's slippery surface made every movement futile. In Shi Feng's hand, a dagger gleamed in the dim light. Just as he readied his strike, tiny fist-sized purple nodules across the platform began to writhe. In an instant, thick, corrosive violet gas hissed from each pore, eating through fabric and sizzling against metal. Shi Feng felt sharp stings across his back, where his tunic had already been laced with holes, but the toxin posed him no real threat. Seizing the moment, he dropped the dagger, then swept his arm behind the woman's shoulder. With a single, fluid motion, he drove the blade through her back. It slid free through her breastbone in a spray of red. The woman let out a high, piercing scream and convulsed beneath him. Pulling the dagger free, Shi Feng vaulted off the platform with a few light taps of his boots and came to rest beside Juliana. "I did the job," he announced calmly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. Juliana gave him a wry grin as she studied the ragged tears in his clothing. "You did fantastic," she teased. "Although, you look a bit exposed." She tapped one of the shredded patches on his jacket. "Maybe next time, fewer fashion disasters?" Shi Feng allowed himself a small smile. Noted. He hefted his dagger, ready for whatever came next. In an instant, Juliana recalled the girl in black, standing beside her. With a swift tug, she drew Shi Feng out of the girl's line of sight. She refused to let this presumptuous stranger make any unwelcome move on Shi Feng, no matter how brazen her intentions. The black-clad girl watched them go, her jaw dropping in disbelief. How had this young duo just slain a mighty soul emperor? She'd already been impressed by Juliana's combat prowess, but Shi Feng's power was on a completely different level. His aura didn't even pulse with overwhelming soul energy, so how had he managed such a feat? The mystery only deepened her shock. She had witnessed the power of the Spider-Woman's purple poisonous mist, so potent that even a seasoned soul emperor of equal rank could lose control if he inhaled it carelessly. Yet Shi Feng strode through the haze completely unharmed, his robes the only casualty of the assault. At his side, his young companion stood just as unscathed. The Spider-Woman's eyes narrowed in disbelief. How could they move with such speed and precision, sidestepping her deadliest attack without even awakening a martial soul. Countless questions swirled in her mind, but when she opened her mouth to demand answers, not a single word came out. Frustration twisted her lips into a bitter smile. There was no way these two would ever reveal the full extent of their abilities. Then, with crushing clarity, she realized how sorely she'd underestimated them. These youths were far more powerful than she dared imagine. In a sudden vision, she saw them ruling Slaughter City, every foe bowing before their might. Her scream caught in her throat as blood began to well from her lips, slicking the cold stone beneath her feet. The delicate face she'd worn, no more than 30 years old, contorted in agony. In mere breaths, her skin sagged into deep wrinkles, and her jet-black hair turned a ghostly silver. She staggered, clutching her cheeks, voice trembling as she whispered, "So, this is my true face." Shi Feng stood on the balcony, surveying the motionless form of the elderly woman below. "She sustains her youth by draining men's life energy," he observed, turning to the woman in black at his side. "What should we do with her corpse?" Hulina, her ebony cloak fluttering in the breeze, answered without hesitation, "Just toss her off. The law enforcement team will come by to collect her later." "Very well." With that, Shi Feng bent down, seized the old woman's body, and hurled it over the railing. His supernatural strength sent her tumbling more than 10 meters before she landed squarely in the street with a dull thud. Pedestrians on the pavement scattered, gawking in stunned silence. Everyone knew the area's resident Hundi, a sole emperor-level cultivator, was a force to be reckoned with. No one had ever dared offend her, yet here she was, flung out like refuse. Without a word, Shi Feng turned back inside and repeated the process for the men whose energies had been sapped to near death. One by one, he hauled their limp forms to the balcony and cast them off. Below, bodies and debris littered the street, drawing even more fearful glances from onlookers. The ground floor had become a battlefield of its own. Scorch marks from arcane spells, shattered furniture, and the remnants of the frantic struggle between the drained men and the sole emperor woman. Shi Feng surveyed the wreckage and shook his head. There was no point in tidying this mess now. He reached out and gripped Hulina's arm. "Come on," he said, leading her past the threshold. Together they entered the staircase, leaving the chaos and curious crowds far below them. Shi Feng led the woman up a narrow staircase. "Let's take a look at the third floor." The woman dressed in black hesitated for a heartbeat, then followed him into a single spacious room that opened onto a wide, open-air balcony. Her personal effects, simple toiletries neatly lined up on a dresser, folded garments stacked on a shelf, were tidy and well kept. Shi Feng realized she must conduct her business on the second floor. This quiet suite was clearly her private refuge. He turned back to her and spoke calmly. "I don't think we need your services anymore." Her dark eyes flashed with annoyance. "Your rookie protection lasts 12 hours, she reminded him. "That protection's still in effect. You've only been here a couple of hours. With me, you'd be far safer. Besides, don't you want to learn more about the hell-killing field? If you plan to stay in the inner city, you'll have to fight at least once every year." Shi Feng shook his head. "Thanks, but we're not worried about ambushes. As for the killing field's rules, we'll pick them up soon enough." The woman in black bit her lip, frustration clear in her stance. Shi Feng's words left no room for negotiation. Her services were no longer required. Lena had served as the Slaughter King's envoy for years, and in all that time, neither she nor her fellow couriers had ever encountered a newcomer quite like him. He'd brusquely ordered her to step aside. Most fresh recruits would have begged to linger at her side, drawn by both her rank and her beauty, and truth be told, Lena never objected to a one-night pleasure if the man was worth it. But Shi Feng treated her with icy indifference, using her only as a guide. "All right." Lena's voice was cool as she nodded once and turned away, descending the grand staircase. If Shi Feng no longer needed her services, she'd take this as an unexpected afternoon off, perfect for finding Felix, the handsome officer from the enforcement squad, and blowing off some steam. She spotted him leaning casually against the railing in the main hall, arms crossed, that familiar playful grin on his face. "Lena, you're impossibly cold," he teased. "I saw the way he looked at you. If anyone deserves a little fun, it's you. Why not admit it?" Shi Feng followed several paces behind. Lena threw him a sidelong glance and caught his eyes flicking over her coat. Her cheeks warmed. With a confident shrug, she swept the coat's lapels open, just enough to reveal a hint of lace. Then, as calmly as if she were swapping cloaks, she unfastened her underlayer and slipped into a fresh one, right there in full view. Shi Feng's expression remained unreadable, but he deliberately turned his head away. Felix laughed softly, shaking his head in amusement. Lena finished adjusting her coat, smoothed a stray lock of hair back into place, and offered Shi Feng a triumphant smile. The trio stood in silence for a heartbeat, the unspoken tension crackling between them. Shi Feng shrugged off Huliena's teasing glare. He'd grown used to her playful temptations and prided himself on his self-control. His clothes, shredded from the skirmish, lay in tatters at his feet. He pulled fresh garments from his pack and changed swiftly. The lean, well-defined muscles beneath the fabric made Huliena's eyes sparkle. She bit her lip and swallowed hard. A moment of silence, and then Huliena's stomach rumbled so loudly it echoed between the ruined walls. She glanced up at Shi Feng with pleading eyes. "I'm starving," she admitted. "I've heard there's free food somewhere in this death trap of a city, but I haven't the faintest idea where to look." Shi Feng felt his cheeks heat. Juliana rolled her eyes. "Don't tell me you don't know. After all, you chased off that gorgeous guide we met earlier. I thought you had all the answers." He threw up his hands, exasperated. "Believe me, I'm not worried about you getting jealous, but the way you were staring at her." "Oh, please," Juliana cut in, waving him off. "Jealousy's the last thing on my mind, so will you help me find this food or not?" Shi Feng shrugged. "What choice do we have? We can gnaw on these rock-hard rations, or we can head outside and see where the relief supplies are being handed out." Juliana winced at the thought of the smoke-choked streets beyond their door. But the dry biscuits in front of them were almost impossible to swallow. "All right," she said. "Let's go find the food distribution point." She slipped her dark veil into place and smoothed down her black dress. The snug, jet-black fabric traced every line of her graceful frame, and in her right hand she gripped the hilt of a silver longsword. A chill, lethal aura radiated from her like a Valkyrie ready for battle. Shi Feng watched her for a moment, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Hulina's striking attire would certainly draw unwanted attention and challenges once they stepped outside. Still, he needed to build their reputation, and this was the perfect opportunity for a show of force. "Lead the way," he said, moving to open the door. The instant Shi Feng crossed the threshold, Juliana felt the intensity of his murderous intent spike. In response, her own frost-tipped aura sharpened. She was quick to grasp his plan. Without the King of Slaughter's envoy to shield them, they'd be easy targets for anyone looking to make a name by taking down powerful outsiders. But attracting that kind of danger was exactly what Shi Feng intended. Shi Feng and Juliana barely crossed the threshold of the ruined tenement when a horde of fallen, souls twisted beyond reason, descended on them like wolves. No one in this part of the city stood by idly. Every face was hungry for blood. The moment Shi Feng guided Juliana into the open, the mob surged forward, weapons glinting, feral snarls ripping through the air. Some among these lunatics boasted power on par with the dreaded Spider Empress of the Soul Realm. Shi Feng planted his feet crackling with electric energy as he centered himself in the 3,000 Thundersteps stance. Lightning arced along his right arm as he formed his signature lightning fist. In a blur of motion, he struck Soul King-level attackers one after another, each blow shattering bone and spirit. Even the Soul Emperors, seasoned veterans of countless battles, coughed up blood and fled in sheer terror. Within moments, smoke curled around a handful of broken corpses, and only Shi Feng and Juliana remained standing. Without a backward glance, Shi Feng grabbed Juliana's hand and led her away, knowing full well this carnage was just the opening act. Every alley in the City of Slaughter held another ambush. Every battle thus far seemed drawn by Juliana's very presence. Despite his growing frustration, Shi Feng forced a wry grin. They paused only long enough to interrogate a stumbling fallen for directions to a proper meal, then set off toward the nearest tavern, steel in their eyes and the promise of more danger stirring in the shadows behind them. Slaughter City teemed with the corrupted, and the instant Shi Feng and Hulina appeared, murderous auras blazing, they were marked as newcomers. Still, despite the raw ferocity emanating from them, more than a few thrill-seekers tested their blades. They pressed onward toward the Enforcer District, the only quarter where food was reliably available. A handful of makeshift restaurants and services had sprung up here, offering almost anything one could import from the outside world, for a price. Apart from the occasional free meal, everything else was exorbitantly costly, payable only in blood coins, Bloody Mary's own currency. This grim economy fueled Slaughter City's daily body count. Every life taken yielded fresh blood, which could be exchanged for precisely the goods a killer desired. At last, Shi Feng and Hulina reached the boundary of the law enforcement sector. As they crossed into its relative safety, the covetous stares of onlookers flickered to fear. Both were drenched in blood, their murderous intent still simmering like captured lightning. "Let's go," Shi Feng murmured, taking Hulina by the hand and guiding her deeper into the district's guarded boulevards. Chapter 149. Let's give it a try. Inside Slaughter City, no fighting is allowed. Patrons can eat, shop, and stroll the streets in complete safety. Although the food here isn't gourmet, the ingredients, shipped up from the town above, are fresh enough. After finishing their meal, Shi Feng and Hulina wandered through the marketplace. Every shop accepted soul coins, though the prices were astronomical, or Bloody Marys, which could also be bought on site. They browsed curiosities and supplies until a pair of stern enforcers approached. "Closing time," one of them said curtly. Shi Feng frowned. It was his first day here. He hadn't realized the Enforcer District sealed itself every 12 hours. Each reopening marked another day since the city's descent into madness. There was no sunrise or sunset, only that eerie purple moon hanging overhead, casting its ghostly light on the blood-stained streets. At the barred exit, Shi Feng and Lina paused. Beyond the gates, a fierce brawl had already erupted. Combatants clashed with brutal efficiency. Steel rang on steel, and spells crackled through the air. The crowd pressed in from both sides, voices shouting, desperate to catch a glimpse of the violence beyond the district's safety. Lina's eyes gleamed. "Looks like our first real challenge." Shi Feng tightened his grip on his sword hilt. "Then let's give it a try." With that, the two slipped through a gap in the crowd, ready to test their mettle against the chaos that lay just outside Slaughter City's guarded walls. People often duck into the enforcement zone to shake off their pursuers, only to be ejected when closing time arrives. Predictably, the hunters wait at the exits, determined to finish the job. This capital of slaughter is teeming with bloodthirsty folk. The handful Shi Feng and Hulina encountered on the way in were only a fraction of the denizens hiding in its shadows. After a fierce, disorienting battle, so brutal that everyone around froze in horror, Shi Feng and Hulina burst free of the crowd. They cut down wave after wave of attackers before finally making it back to the little white building they'd claimed as a refuge. To their relief, it stood abandoned, unclaimed during their long absence. Their clothes were drenched in blood. Juliana's brow creased with frustration as she hurried inside and slammed the bathroom door. Shi Feng leaned against the doorway, closing his eyes to steady his racing heart. An hour later, Shi Feng emerged, towel in hand, his damp hair slicked back. He barely recognized the room he'd stepped into. Every piece of furniture had been rearranged, every surface wiped clean, and fresh linens lay neatly folded on the bed. Juliana stood by the window, surveying her handiwork with a triumphant smile. Shi Feng took a deep breath of the crisp, clean air. "You did all this while I was in the shower?" She turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were in there forever. I figured you'd appreciate coming back to something less murderous." He offered a grateful grin. "You're a lifesaver." Juliana tossed him a playful wink. "Just don't make me do it again anytime soon." Shi Feng crossed the room and dropped onto the freshly made bed. As he closed his eyes, he realized he actually meant it. Tonight, at least, they were safe. The mattress and quilt were now pale pink, and even the sofa had been draped in a matching cover. "From now on, this is our home base in Slaughter City," Juliana declared, hands on her hips and a triumphant smile on her face. Shi Feng nodded appreciatively. "It looks amazing. But with everything so pink, I'm worried someone might try to break in, or worse, pull some unspeakable prank in your bedroom. They wouldn't dare. Juliana's almond-shaped eyes flashed with indignation. Then, relaxing a little, she added, "We're out hunting monsters every day. No one would risk raiding our place. Our home will never be defiled." "All right, Sister Lena," Shi Feng said with a mock bow. "Just point me at whichever target you want dealt with, and I'll take care of it." Juliana climbed onto the sofa beside him and studied his face intently. Shi Feng shifted, suddenly self-conscious. "You've been staring at me for a while. What's on your mind?" A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Feng, do you think it would hurt to, do that kind of thing?" He cocked his head, puzzled. "Do what kind of thing?" Shi Feng leaned back against the wall and shrugged. "That's exactly what I saw on the street today." Hulina's cheeks flamed. "Oh, that kind of thing really hurts, doesn't it? You shouldn't dwell on it." He gave her a deadpan look. "Some people are psychopaths. They actually enjoy the pain." Her eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Absolutely." Shi Feng nodded solemnly, then cleared his throat. Senior sister, I'm heading off to train. You should turn in early. You've been at contract work all day. Leave the estate's watch to me." Before she could protest, he slipped out of the room and onto the open-air balcony. Only when the door clicked shut did he breathe a sigh of relief, willing his heartbeat to slow. He knew exactly what Juliana was hinting at. She clearly wanted more than just conversation. Better to back off for now. It wouldn't do to get caught unprepared. Inside, Juliana watched his departure through narrowed eyes. That dense little junior brother. It was like trying to reason with a block of wood. Juliana had no choice but to return to her cot and resume her cultivation exercises. Outside in the corridor, Shi Feng settled himself into a cross-legged meditation and began running through his qi conditioning routines. Yet after only a few long breaths, he opened his eyes and stared at the purple moon that hovered faintly in the cavern's vaulted ceiling. Disappointment flickered across his features. This was a mere illusion of the moon. Its silvery light could not penetrate the 1,000 meters of rock above Slaughter City. Without real moon essence to absorb, his lunar phase techniques wasted away, and his cultivation progress slowed to a crawl. Shi Feng sighed. If the moon's blessing was cut off, his only option for rapid advancement would be the Bloody Mary he'd harvested earlier. He couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. After slaughtering so many foes in his search for power, he'd let their blood go to waste. Hulina, who had just laid herself back on her bed, suddenly sensed movement behind her. Her eyes flew open. To her surprise, Shi Feng was calmly padding back into the room. "Have you figured it out?" she asked quietly, her disappointment lacing her tone. Shi Feng offered her a reassuring smile as he settled onto the nearby sofa. "Don't worry about me," he said. "You can go on practicing." Seeing the resolve in his eyes, Juliana suppressed her frustration and turned back to her own exercises, determined to make every moment count. Shi Feng realized they still needed someone to stand guard by the door, so he and his senior sister, Juliana, could cultivate and rest undisturbed. He planned to head out tomorrow in search of a suitable candidate to bind as their servant. Besides, he'd heard whispers of a killing pit buried beneath this city. If he could rack up enough victories there, he might earn an early release from this place. He rose to his feet and bowed slightly to Juliana. "Senior sister, I'll take the first watch tonight." She opened one eye and nodded. "Be careful." With a curt nod, Shi Feng descended to the first floor. Instead of diving back into soul force cultivation, he summoned the Eye of Heaven's punishment. Golden runes danced before his vision as he scanned the chamber, intent on uncovering the killing city's deepest secrets. The ceiling above him dissolved into inky blackness, sheer rock stretching upward beyond sight. Then he shifted his gaze downward. What he saw made his pulse thunder in his ears. More than 800 meters below, a vast cavern glowed with a dim, blood-red light. That eerie, crimson haze could only be one thing, the fabled blood pool. But the pool of blood lay far beyond his line of sight, too distant to study in detail. Shi Feng swept his gaze across the streets once more. Though Killing City knew neither day nor night, an eerie hush had fallen. Corpses were few, and the clangor of combat had all but died away. Even the fallen needed moments of respite to recover and hone their skills. For them, the lockdown of the law enforcement zone was little different from the night that blanketed the world outside. Chapter 150, Heading to the Killing Fields of Hell. The title King of Slaughter echoed in Shi Feng's mind, sending a chill through his veins. Before him sat a towering figure draped in a scarlet cloak, perched atop an elevated throne. The man leaned forward, mouth agape, drawing a crimson stream of blood from the pool at his feet into his waiting maw. Huh? Suddenly, the man raised his head and scanned the surroundings, a wave of terrifying presence rippling outward. Shi Feng's heart thumped wildly. He immediately dropped his gaze, feigning disinterest. This had to be the King of Slaughter, a level 99 title Douluo known as Tang Chen, the great-grandfather of Tang San. But the Tang Chen Shi Feng remembered had been a wise and noble protector. This one, corrupted by Rakshasa power, had become a merciless, bloodthirsty monster with no memory of his former self. Shi Feng exhaled softly, relief mingling with a fresh surge of unease. Thankfully, the king didn't appear to recognize him, or even realize anyone was spying. He'd caught his breath, but his spirit reserve was nearly depleted from the intense mental exertion. Sliding down against the cold stone wall, Shi Feng closed his eyes and let his breathing steady. Unlike soul force, which could be strengthened directly through cultivation, spiritual power only grew as a byproduct of raising one's soul foundation. Shi Feng focused on restoring that delicate energy, knowing he would need every ounce of both soul and spirit to survive the battles yet to come. When his senses had steadied once more, he would press on toward the dreaded killing fields of hell. Mental strength is fundamentally tied to one's innate talent. Some people awaken with formidable psychic power from birth. Others find their abilities magnified by consuming rare, earth-shaking treasures. Unlike soul power, which can be replenished through meditation and training exercises, mental power recovers far more slowly, and there's no shortcut to speed up that process. Shi Feng's current regimen focuses exclusively on cultivating his soul power, doing nothing for his mental reserves. All he can do is quiet his thoughts and wait. Concentration and calm at least allow his mental power to seep back more steadily. I wish there were some method to accelerate the recovery of mental power, Shi Feng murmured to himself. After 10 long hours, his drained mental power finally crept back to its previous peak and even edged upward, though the increase was so minuscule he barely noticed it. Growth at this pace would take ages. Just then, footsteps sounded overhead. Hulina descended the staircase, her white robe flowing around her like mist. A slender, gold-trimmed belt cinched at her narrow waist, emphasizing the graceful curve of her figure. Even in simple attire, she carried herself with effortless poise and quiet confidence, her presence impossible to ignore. Juliana stood before him, a long silver sword in hand, her silken robes billowing around her like the wings of a celestial being. In the fading light, her delicate features and graceful poise made her look as if she'd stepped right out of a masterpiece painting. Shi Feng couldn't tear his eyes away. "How do I look? Does the outfit suit me?" Hulina asked, her lips curved in a playful smile as she circled him. "Amazing," Shi Feng found himself admitting honestly. "You look like a fairy in mid-flight." "Perfect," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Let's go teach these fools what fear is." With that, she strode toward the open door. "Senior Sister Lena," Shi Feng protested, rushing to catch up. "Dressing like that in Slaughter City, without even a veil, you'll have every lecher in the place chasing us instead of our real targets." Juliana paused, glancing back over her shoulder with a wicked grin. "Exactly. I want them distracted, thinking only of me. While they're scrambling, we'll cut through their ranks and make sure the entire city hears our names. Come on, Shi Feng. Stay close." Shi Feng sighed inwardly, but he squared his shoulders and drew his blade. All right. I'll fight. Just don't blame me if I get too distracted by the fairy." Together, they slipped into the streets of Slaughter City, ready to unleash havoc. Shi Feng straightened, eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Let's head to the hell-killing field. I want to try my hand at the trial." Hulina gave a curt nod. "Very well. Let's go." No sooner had they slipped away down the alley than the degenerates loitering on the street sprang to life. Whispers rippled through the crowd. They knew this pair. Hulina's unrivaled beauty kept most would-be attackers at bay. Yet there were always the brash few who couldn't resist the chance for blood sport. The moment they caught sight of the striking duo, a dozen brutes surged forward. Shi Feng and Huliana flowed into position, backs pressed together. Steel sang as they met the first wave of snarling enemies. Blade, dagger, and fist clashed in a deadly dance. In less than 10 minutes, the onslaught fell silent. The last of the degenerates lay broken on the cobblestones. Crouching, Shi Feng plucked a shriveled corpse from the jumble of bodies. Even in death, its aura screamed Soul Emperor, the highest cultivation level among the fallen. He'd chosen this one deliberately. The more advanced a being's cultivation, the denser and more potent the life essence coursing through their blood. In the outside world, harvesting a Soul Emperor's blood would be nigh impossible. Here, in the brutal heart of the killing capital, it was almost routine. A faint smile curved Shi Feng's lips as he held the corpse aloft. Trials and tribulations awaited them in the hell-killing field, but this was only the beginning. Shi Feng felt the warm rush of blood surge into his abdomen, a potent essence spreading through every muscle and sinew. It barely stirred his soul power. Any increase there was almost imperceptible, but his physical strength, speed, and endurance all climbed sharply. In this city of slaughter, he knew, blood absorption did little for one's spirit. Its true gift lay in forging bodies tough enough to survive the carnage. Beside him, his companion, an elegant, deadly woman, took the same pill, her aura flickering as her spirit energy snapped back to full. With renewed vigor, they advanced toward the dreaded killing fields. Fallen souls who had witnessed their might slipped away at a distance. Those who charged in ignorance found themselves cut down in moments. Shi Feng's blade moved like lightning, and his partner's graceful strikes were no less lethal. Wave after wave of attackers collapsed before them, their bodies piling up like crimson statues. By the time they reached the great arched gate, blackened stone carved into writhing demons, rumors of their deeds had already spread. Even those who hadn't witnessed the slaughter had heard the whispers. A strikingly handsome man and a breathtakingly beautiful woman, wielding strength so terrifying it seemed they might outmatch the demonic denizens of the fields themselves. And now, at the threshold of Hell's own arena, Shi Feng and his ally prepared to make their next move. Streaks of crimson marred the pure white fabric of Huliana's robe, lending her an icy, forbidding presence. Shi Feng casually wiped the corner of his mouth, betraying none of the inner thrill he felt. He deliberately targeted those high-cultivated underdogs, picking them off one by one, and along the way had even drained the blood of 5 soul emperors. He knew he had to strike quickly. Once his reputation for ruthlessness spread, easy prey like this would vanish, and no one would come begging for him at their doorsteps. Huliana's eyes narrowed as she took a step closer. Her voice was soft, but edged with concern. "Feng, why have you drained so many people's blood today?" Shi Feng sighed in frustration. "Senior sister, ever since I arrived in the killing capital, my soul power cultivation has slowed to a crawl. The only way I can restore my strength quickly is by drawing blood." Huliana nodded thoughtfully, remaining silent. Before them stood a vast, circular edifice, Hell's killing field. The sheer size of the arena, its obsidian walls rising like a colossus above the city's heart, radiated a suffocating dread. Positioned squarely at the center of this brutal metropolis, it underscored the arena's unrivaled importance to every assassin and gladiator who called this place home. "How do we get in?" Huliana asked, glancing at the sealed gates. Shi Feng explained, "Admission requires a single serving of Bloody Mary, one of the specialty drinks they serve here. Once you hand it over, you're free to watch the battles. If you want to compete, you register with your ID card." He paused to let that sink in. "Matches are held in teams of 10. After you sign up, there's no backing out, not even if you realize your opponents are far stronger. Once your name's on the roster, you're committed." Shi Feng and Huliana stood before the ominous gates of the hell-slaughtering fields, each clutching a single glass of Bloody Mary. The iron door loomed over them, its jagged edges stained dark with old blood. "Remember," Shi Feng said quietly, "only one of every 10 can walk out alive. If you're that one, you win. Everyone else, they're ruthlessly eliminated." Huliana's brow furrowed. 1 in 10, that's cruel. After we sign up, we're packed into a waiting room with 9 strangers. We won't know how strong any of them are until the gates open. It all comes down to luck." "Brutal is the point," Shi Feng replied. No alliances, no second chances. If someone's stronger, the rest die. If you get lucky, you survive. They joined the procession of new entrants. As they advanced, they saw the remnants of earlier rounds. 9 former competitors trailed behind a single survivor, heads bowed, glasses empty. The survivor, his armor splintered, his arms and face smeared with blood, strode ahead with grim satisfaction. At the gate, stone-faced attendants collected the 9 empty glasses, pouring their contents into a vast blackened vat. Shi Feng handed his glass to Huliena. "Here." She took it, hands trembling ever so slightly. They steeled themselves and stepped toward the hideous doorway. The attendants seized their glasses in silence, tipping the crimson liquid into the vat until every last drop vanished. Then, without a word, they swung the massive door wide. A roar rose from within, a chorus of pain, fury, and something almost triumphant. Shi Feng inhaled sharply, tightened his grip on the hilt at his side, and led the way into hell. Chapter 151. Winning the First Victory. Shi Feng and Huliena hadn't registered for the contest. They simply climbed up onto the raised viewing platform. From up here, the so-called hell-killing field looked deceptively simple compared to its imposing exterior. A vast, circular arena, more than 100 meters across, its perimeter lined with concentric tiers of spectator stands. They found 2 empty seats and settled in. Down below, the grisly aftermath of the latest match was on full display. 8 bodies lay scattered across the dusty floor, their blood staining the earth. Only 2 combatants remained, locked in a merciless duel. In mere moments, one of them lunged, sank his teeth into his rival's throat, and the victim slumped to the ground, bleeding out in an instant. A heavy silence fell as the gate at the far end of the arena ground open, and the victor stumbled out, chest heaving but triumphant. "How was that?" Shi Feng asked, glancing at Huliena. She shook her head with a faint smile. "That guy was nowhere near my level." Shi Feng nodded in agreement. Both of the fighters had been Soul King cultivators, formidable, to be sure, but no match for Huliena's own prowess. If she had entered the ring, victory would have been hers in moments. "Let's watch a few more rounds," he said. They leaned forward and waited. Before long, 10 more gladiators gathered at the narrow entrance ramp, ready to flood the arena and begin the next bloody contest. The hell-slaughtering field lay sealed by iron palisades, soaring nearly 30 meters into the sky. Once you entered, there was no way out. At the field's edge, the great gate creaked open, and 10 combatants strode onto the blood-stained arena. Front and center was a man whose very presence crackled with overwhelming power, a bona fide Soul Emperor. 2 others flanking him radiated the crushing might of Soul Kings. Behind them, 7 warriors kept their chi tightly sealed, faces pale and eyes wide with fear. At the signal, the Soul Emperor unleashed a deafening roar, his eyes blazing red as he prepared to assert his dominance. In the next heartbeat, the 9 lesser fighters, unable to call upon any soul techniques within this arena, hurled themselves at him in perfect unison. 9 against 1. The odds seemed hopeless. Yet by sheer numbers and ferocious resolve, they battered the Emperor from every side. His roar was cut short by the sound of shattering bone, and with one final, broken cry, he collapsed to the earth. Silence hung heavy in the aftermath, broken only by the labored breathing of the survivors. At last, when the dust had settled, only a single figure remained upright. He had shown no grand display of power, had revealed no mighty aura, and until now had blended into the back ranks entirely unnoticed. When the final echo of combat faded, the victor of the hell-slaughtering field was revealed to be Shi Feng. Shi Feng watched the last duel between the Soul Emperor and the Soul King with keen interest. He and Huliena had already gleaned a crucial lesson. Raw power alone doesn't guarantee victory. Smaller, weaker cultivators can still triumph through guile and strategy. "I've learned enough for now," Shi Feng said, rising from the stands. "I'll go register. You keep watching. Soak up as much as you can." "Be careful," Huliena replied, her eyes fixed on the arena's exit. Moments later, Shi Feng stood before the registration desk. He presented his identity token, filled out the necessary forms, and was led into a small antechamber. 10 other contestants milled about, waiting quietly for their turn. As soon as the current match concluded, Shi Feng's group would be called forward. He settled onto a bench, steeling himself for whatever challenges lay ahead. Page 200. Shi Feng sat alone in the observation chamber, his place secured as the first registrant in his group. A broad glass window faced the killing field, offering him an unobstructed view of the carnage below. On the field, two soul sect cultivators, each at the sect's highest known rank, were locked in a brutal contest. Their clash crackled with energy, but despite their mastery, neither reached the near-mythical tiers of Soul Emperor or Soul Sage. Still, the fight was savage enough to draw every eye in the arena. As that duel approached its climax, the chamber door behind Shi Feng slid open. Through it marched 10 new contestants, each radiating a lethal, murderous aura. At the same moment, the adjoining waiting room's door swung inward, and one by one, 9 more participants entered Shi Feng's chamber. He spared them a brief glance over his shoulder before turning back to the spectacle outside. By the time the 10th warrior crossed the threshold, the room was full. 10 competitors, all primed and waiting, ready to spill blood in the next merciless match. As soon as the previous match ended, Shi Feng would be up. He swept his gaze over the 9 other contestants crowded into the small antechamber. Some bound, some arrogant, some chillingly aloof. Every pair of eyes glittered with lethal intent. The unspoken rule of the hell-killing field forbade any outbreak of violence while waiting, and no one dared contravene it. Shi Feng withdrew his stare. None of them had unleashed their full aura, so judging their true strength was impossible. He silently hoped for a heavyweight opponent. In this arena, building soul power was notoriously slow. The fastest path to leveling up his zombie cultivation lay in drawing blood from someone powerful. After 10 tense minutes, distant shouts signaled the end of the last match. The heavy steel door swung open, and the attendant motioned for the 10 of them, Shi Feng included, onto the killing field. As he climbed the slight incline to the arena floor, Shi Feng glanced up and spotted Hulina in the spectator stands. She caught his eye, flashed him an encouraging thumbs up, and he returned a curt nod before stepping onto the blood-stained sand. "Boy, you're slacking off again? Do you want to die?" A cold voice cut through the din, and in a blink, an elderly man materialized behind Shi Feng, his knobby fingers already clawing for Shi Feng's neck. Shi Feng dropped into a low crouch, pivoting his shoulder into the old man's chest like a battering ram. Under the shock of all watching, the man went airborne, blasted back some 10 meters, and slammed against the iron barrier. He collapsed in a ragged heap, his ribs crushed, breath gone. A Soul King-level warrior felled by a single strike. The spectators roared in disbelief. In that instant, the 8 fighters embroiled in the arena's chaos all froze, eyes snapping to Shi Feng. Across the field, Sanchen Dong darted back and forth at lightning speed, impossible to catch. When his sprint finally slowed, only one middle-aged man remained standing, left alive by Shi Feng's design. Moments later, Shi Feng stepped calmly through the gate of the killing grounds. His robes were spotless, save for a smear of blood at the corner of his mouth. Not a trace of fear marked his face, only the quiet confidence of a survivor. The spectators on the platform gaped at Shi Feng in disbelief. In a single sweep, this young man had annihilated all 9 opponents. From their vantage point, they'd watched his fists spark with lightning, each blow utterly unstoppable. Not even the last Soul Emperor-ranked combatant could withstand him. What chilled them most, however, was how he had drained that powerhouse of every drop of blood, leaving him a withered husk. They'd seen plenty of bloodthirsty fiends before, but never someone who literally sucked the life out of a living legend. Already, many were secretly snapping photos and videos of Shi Feng, mentally flagging him as a force not to be trifled with. Unfazed, Shi Feng plucked a tissue from his pocket, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then vaulted onto the seats with a few agile hops. He landed beside Hulina and offered her a faint smile. "So," he asked quietly, "did you find anything useful?" Shi Feng gave Hulina a steady look as she nodded. "I've watched 4 matches already," she said confidently. "I'm sure I can beat anyone. Well, anyone but you." He offered a small smile. "You'd probably win every one-on-one, but in a 10-person brawl on the killing field, anything can happen. Stay alert." Hulina's grin turned a little mischievous. "Don't worry. I know how to play it cool. I won't be as reckless as you." She rolled her eyes, then squared her shoulders. "All right, I'm going to sign up now and claim my first victory." Just as she turned, Shi Feng held up a hand to stop her. He reached into his soul tool and drew out a sleek black dagger. "Here," he said, pressing it into her palm. "This blade's been tempered in my corpse poison for weeks. If you face someone too strong, aim for an opening and slash. That poison will finish the job." Hulina accepted the dagger with care, then leaned in and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. "Thanks, senior sister's got this," she teased. "I'm more than just decoration." With that, she strode off to register. Shi Feng watched her go, then turned as attendants led him toward the waiting area, the roar of the crowd already rising in the distance.